Chapter 421, It's Good to Be Stronger Than You, Second Update. Proxima Midnight braced herself against the ship's bulkhead, driving her spear deep into the metal plating. Panting, she called out to Thanos, "My lord, the restraining force is coming from his armor. He must be able to manipulate metal." Thanos seized her weapon to steady himself, and then, with a brutal tug, stripped away the plated armor covering his body. He flung it aside like discarded scrap. "Very well," he rumbled. "Then we fight unencumbered." Without his armor, Thanos charged forward, the massive tyrant blade swinging in a deadly arc toward Lucian. At his side, Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive likewise shrugged off their protective gear and surged after him, weapons raised. Lucian watched them carefully. A slow, satisfied smile curled his lips as he focused his power on the three blades. In an instant, the weapons began to wrench themselves free of their owner's grips. Thanos roared in defiance, digging his fingers into the hilt of the tyrant blade and forcing it back toward his hand with sheer strength. But Proxima's spear and Corvus's glaive slipped from their hands the moment they tried to hold on, then flew across the deck and clattered against the far bulkhead. Staggering, Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive scrambled for balance, eyes widening in shock. Thanos alone still held his weapon, but even he struggled, sweat beading at his brow as he fought Lucian's unseen grip. Lucian lifted his chin, confident and composed, ready for the next move in this deadly game. Lucian could only stand by in horror as the strange weapon in his hand sprang to life, spinning around to strike its former masters. A soft, eerie lullaby escaped his lips. "Sleep well, little ones. The blue night sky is so beautiful." Across the field, Thanos barreled forward with murderous intent, his double blades poised to strike. On either side of him, Proxima Midnight and General Corvus Glaive closed in, their weapons gleaming under the starlight. Still humming the melody, Lucian felt the arcane power he'd gleaned from the elf Lucian flow through him. This hypnotic spell, legend said it could subdue even Morgoth, was beyond his full mastery, yet it surged out in a gentle wave. In an instant, Thanos' stern expression slackened, and the two lieutenants on either side faltered mid-assault. A moment later, the battlefield echoed with two wet thuds. Under the lullaby's thrall, Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive froze, and then fell, each impaled by their own weapons in mid-swing. Thanos' grip on his blades loosened so abruptly that they nearly slipped from his hands. But the Mad Titan was far from defeated. With a swift motion, he produced a small yellow stone, its surface pulsing with forbidden energy. The gem unleashed a shockwave that shattered Lucian's hypnotic aura in an instant, leaving him breathless and vulnerable to whatever Thanos struck next. The Mind Stone, cosmic consciousness made manifest. "Ah!" Thanos bellowed, slamming his palm against the Mind Stone embedded in the center of the tyrant's double blade. Its power flared, shattering Lucian's psychic hold on the weapon. With the blade freed from Lucian's control, Thanos surged forward once more. "So the Mind Stone can do that," he growled. Lucian's brow furrowed in surprise. He'd expected the stone to dispel hypnotic spells, but he hadn't realized it could completely block his metal manipulation magic. Perhaps the Mind Stone's power simply overwhelmed the subtle psychic threads he wove into the blade. Once they were cleansed away, there was no channel left for him to command the metal. No matter, he wasn't without options. "Disarm!" Lucian shouted. He swept his arm in a swift arc, unleashing a rule-based spell. The moment the enchantment struck, the tyrant's double blade flew from Thanos' grasp, spinning end over end through the air. The Mad Titan froze, stunned by the sudden loss of his weapon. A disarming spell was absolute. If it hit, the target's weapon had to leave their hand. As a sorcerer, Lucian had studied countless magics. He was prepared for every challenge, even a direct clash with the power of the Mind Stone. "Plasma electromagnetic cannon," Lucian roared, pressing his hands together. In an instant, a searing beam of crackling energy tore through the air, hurling Thanos backward into the remnants of a shattered column. Seizing his chance, Lucian darted forward, sweeping up the tyrant's twin blades. With a flick of his wrist, he extracted the Mind Stone from its housing and slipped it into the secure compartment in his combat suit. Then, rising on a gust of power, he hovered over Thanos just as the Mad Titan staggered back to his feet. "Stubborn, aren't you?" Lucian called, his voice echoing across the ruin-strewn battlefield. He finally allowed himself a wry sigh. That cannon blast, renowned for cutting through mountains, had only scorched a faint black ring on Thanos' chest plate. No wound, no falter. Lucian's own constitution was nothing to sneeze at, but against Thanos it felt puny. He even suspected the Mad Titan's innate durability could rival his own dragon form. As a scientist, Lucian knew brute force was only part of the equation. You still don't grasp who you're facing. Unarmed of his twin blades, Thanos showed no sign of surrender. He shook the dust from his armor, squared his massive shoulders, and fixed Lucian with an unwavering, resolute gaze. Lucian's conviction had never once wavered. He was certain he stood on the side of righteousness. For the justice burning in his heart, he would gladly give his life if it meant upholding his ideals. "I don't need to grasp your greatness," he told Thanos. "All I need is to be stronger than you." As Thanos rose to his feet again, Lucian shook his head. Fanatics like him were the most dangerous kind of enemy, impervious to reason, unreachable by any appeal to common sense. The only language they understood was raw power. To defeat such a foe, you had to surpass him utterly and punish him with sheer force. That principle had guided Lucian from the start. The strong prey on the weak, and only the fittest survive. Only when your might eclipses all others does your truth prevail. As one of his favorite proverbs put it, dignity is forged on the edge of the blade, truth lies within the barrel of a gun. He also liked to quip, "I master my art so that fools will think twice before they speak." It was this creed that had driven him to study magic and pursue ever greater power, so that he could stand face to face with Thanos, this unreasonable colossus of the cosmos, and calmly blow his enemy's head to pieces. Thanos savored the exhilaration of mastering new magics and the steady swell of power flooding through him. "Begone," he snarled. But before his command could take effect, a figure clad in cobalt blue burst out of the murk behind him. It was Nebula, his other adopted daughter. In a flash, she transformed her left arm into a razor-sharp spike and drove it straight into his back, aiming for the heart. The makeshift blade struck true, but it glanced harmlessly off his impenetrable armor, leaving not even a scratch. Roaring in fury, Thanos whirled around, seized Nebula by the throat with his massive hand, and hoisted her into the air. His face twisted with rage. Gamora's betrayal had wounded him deeply, but this was an outrage. The child who once trembled at his feet dared to strike him? "Why?" he thundered. "I destroyed my enemies to protect you, sacrificed a world for your sake, remade your broken body into something stronger, and this is your thanks." Nebula's eyes blazed with hatred as she stared up at him. "You flattened my home world and slaughtered my people. You twisted me into half machine, half monster," she spat. "You expect me to be grateful? No. I came for justice." She tightened her grip on the dagger, her heart pounding with long-suppressed fury. Ever since childhood, Thanos' cruelty, power, and sheer terror had been burned into her mind. She had loathed him from the first moment she laid eyes on him, yet she'd never dared to show. Instead, she'd bowed, flattered, and begged, anything to keep breathing under his shadow. But all that changed when Lucian struck. He tore through Thanos' defenses like a whirlwind, reduced the Mad Titan to something more animal than God. He ended the fight by stripping away Thanos' weapons, and even the Mind Stone itself. In that moment, she saw the truth. He was neither invincible nor immortal. A cold rush of vengeance surged through her. The years of fear and hatred erupted in her veins. Without hesitation, she lunged from the darkness, her dagger aimed at the one being who had tormented her for so long. This was the reckoning she had waited a lifetime to deliver. Chapter 422, I Am a Hexagonal Magician, first update. Then go to hell. In one brutal sweep, Thanos seized Nebula's left mechanical arm and wrenched it from her shoulder, tearing half her body apart as though she were nothing more than a rag doll. He flung the mangled limb and mutilated torso onto the ground like refuse. Nebula's life now depended entirely on her cybernetic implants. Remove them, and she had barely 10 minutes left to live. Yet even as she slumped to the floor, bleeding oil and blood, her eyes burned with defiant calm. "If I go down, I'll watch you die first," she hissed. The terror she'd felt for years at the name Thanos evaporated the moment she saw his true strength, vast but not invincible. After enduring a dozen horrors worse than death, she no longer feared the end. You'll die before I do, she added softly, a cold promise in her voice. At that instant, Lucian burst onto the battlefield. Thanos wheeled to face him, gargantuan muscles bulging beneath his skin. Then let's see who falls first, he roared. With no weapon but his own fists, he charged at Lucian like a living battering ram, an unstoppable force intent on crushing the next opponent in his path. Lucian lifted his hand and intoned, "Fairy law." In an instant, a blinding white light rained down from the heavens, engulfing Thanos' massive frame. Under Lucian's telekinetic command, the tyrant's twin blades tore free, each edge cleaving through reality itself with the force of hundreds of thousands of tons. As the luminous torrent dissipated, Thanos' severed head rolled to the ground. Lucian caught the blades with effortless precision. That's it. Case closed. A hush fell over the clearing. Then, from the Predator base's landing pad, Star-Lord and the rest of the team poured out of their ship, rushing forward at once. Gamora knelt beside her sister, cradling Nebula's trembling form in her arms. Her voice, usually sharp and guarded, softened as she spoke. "Nebula, I never wanted to beat you," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I always knew you were stronger than me. All I ever wanted was a sister. With Saros gone, I just want you to be happy." Nebula's pallid features flickered with the tiniest smile in response, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they'd forged through childhood rivalries, shared battles, and unspoken loyalties. The air seemed to hold its breath as hope, fragile but real, began to bloom between them. "You'll be all right." Gamora swept her gaze over Rocket and the rest of their ragtag team. "We need a fix. Fast. Rocket, you're our top mechanic. Can you get her back online?" Rocket crouched beside Nebula, examining the mangled half of her body. Exposed servos, frayed wiring, crushed plating. It was a disaster zone. He ran a paw along her arm socket and shook his head. "No proper tools, no replacement parts, and she's bleeding precious seconds. There's nothing here I can use." Nebula's eyelids fluttered. Her voice was a whisper. "I don't have a minute left." Before anyone could respond, Lucian stepped forward, the twin tyrant blades strapped to his back. He drew both swords in a single, fluid motion, letting them hum with latent power. An intricate pattern of glowing runes rippled down each blade's edge. He slashed through the air, and a ribbon of arcane energy leapt from steel to circuit. In an instant, twisted metal realigned, shattered plating reformed, and torn wires wove themselves back into place. The cold gleam of Nebula's mechanical arm snapped perfectly into line with her shoulder. Lucian sheathed his blades and offered Nebula his hand. "There, good as new." Nebula flexed her restored limb, testing its weight. A shudder of relief passed through the group. Gamora exhaled, a small smile tugging at her lips. "The universe is even more incredible than we thought," she murmured. Rocket let out a low whistle. "You've got skills, Lucian." Lucian only shrugged, tucking his blades back into their scabbards. "When you've seen as much of this galaxy as I have, you learn a few tricks." And for the first time in what felt like ages, they moved forward together, stronger and surprisingly hopeful. Just as the champions exhaled their first sighs of relief, basking in the glow of hard-won victory, the sky above them shuddered with a silent crack. In an instant, a pale blue figure plummeted earthward, warhammer raised, only to slam mercilessly into the back of Lucian's skull. The impact rang out in a single bone-shattering blow, fast, precise, and intended to kill outright. His assailant was none other than Ronan the Accuser, long hidden, long feared, and now revealed. Cloaked by the very power of his multifunction Kree warhammer, he had drifted unseen above the fray, gathering every detail of the battle below. From that vantage, he noted Lucian's uncanny reliance on magic and ranged powers, rather than raw, close-quarters combat against foes like Thanos and his lieutenants. Such caution suggested a frail physical form, much like the ebony maws, ripe for a single, devastating strike. As commander of the Kree Empire, Ronan understood the cosmic might contained within each Infinity Stone. Should Lucian fall here and now, the two gems in his possession would pass, unchallenged, into Ronan's grasp. With inexorable purpose, the Accuser prepared to claim those stones, and with them, the power to reshape the universe itself. Lucian hovered amid the drifting wreckage of the Dark Star, eyes narrowed on his opponent. He muttered to himself, "If we can secure 2 Infinity Stones, we'll make up for this loss." But things never turn out that easily. He lifted his chin and spoke aloud. Ronan, did you really think I wouldn't notice you lurking overhead? With a roar, Ronan brought his massive hammer down, charged with enough cosmic energy to crush steel, straight toward Lucian's head. Lucian's lips curved into a confident smirk. In one fluid motion, he spun on his heel, summoning the tyrant's double blade in his hand. The hammer met the blade with a thunderous clang, sparks showering into the void. Ronan staggered back, astonished. You actually intercepted that full-force strike with your body? Lucian's telepathic awareness had remained locked on Ronan throughout the fight, anticipating any attempt to flee by shuttle. He sheathed the blade with a deliberate flourish. I never take my eyes off an important target, he said coolly. Ronan's fury flared as he realized how badly he'd miscalculated his adversary's skill and his own. Grow, Lucian bellowed, and in an instant the tyrant blade in his right hand swelled to colossal size, its power surging to unimaginable heights. He swung at Ronan with brutal force. Caught off guard, the Kree captain raised his hammer to block, but even that was no match. The enchanted sword, already feared for its ability to shatter a captain's shield, cleaved the Kree hammer in two, and in the same stroke, severed Ronan's arm. I may be a hex wizard, Lucian said coolly, watching Ronan reel in pain, but don't underestimate me in hand-to-hand combat. In his other forms, Lucian had never matched Thanos' raw might, but he was a dragon slayer at heart, and his army of clones made him every bit as formidable as Ronan. Now, empowered by his giant form, his strength had grown exponentially. With a few more hours of training, he knew he could defeat Ronan bare-fisted. In fact, one of his clones was already in the world of Cardcaptor Sakura, studying the fight card. Sooner or later, he'd simply cast a spell and gain peak martial skill on the spot. Ah, my arm! Ronan howled, staggering back. Realizing he stood no chance, the wounded captain turned and fled, desperate to reach a ship and escape the planet. Lucian's voice trembled with grief and fury as he advanced on the man before him. Ronan, you slaughtered my wife and daughter. Tonight, I'll see your head rolled in the dirt. He barely took a step when a towering figure lunged from the shadows. The stranger's hulking form pinned Lucian back. Then, without hesitation, he produced 2 daggers and drove them mercilessly into Ronan's eye sockets. Arr! Ronan's scream tore through the air, but his struggles were feeble. His arms were gone, severed in an earlier clash, and blood gushed from the stumps, draining his strength. Held fast by the sturdy executioner, Ronan could only gasp as the blades twisted home. Within moments, the life ebbed from him. The man withdrew his daggers, and Ronan's body went limp. Lucian stood frozen, relief and horror warring in his eyes as the courtyard fell silent, save for the soft drip of blood onto cold stone. Chapter 423, The Supreme's Invitation, Second Update. Lucian stood amid the wreckage, his staff glowing with soft emerald light as he channeled a mass healing spell. Before him lay a burly figure in battered armor, Drax the Destroyer, the very warrior whose name had haunted the Nova Empire. As Lucian's magic wove through the man's wounds, he reached into Drax's memories. Every vivid recollection confirmed it. This was indeed the planet of the fabled destroyer. No wonder the locals had regarded him with awe. Principal! Gamora's voice cut through the hum of arcane energies. She approached, flanked by a stern, middle-aged officer in the crisp black and gold uniform of the Nova Empire. Captain Rahim of the Nova Patrol requests an audience with you. Lucian straightened, tucking away his staff. Behind him, wards of repair magic drifted over the shattered hull of Temple 2, sealing gashes in its plating. Beyond that, dozens of starfighters and 2 dreadnoughts, the Dark Star and the Crimson Vengeance, were rising from ruin under his careful ministrations. Thank you, Gamora, Lucian said, slipping his aura back to neutral. Half an hour ago, he had defeated Thanos and Ronan in a fierce duel, then sent Gamora, Yondu, and their teams to free the Nova Patrol's prisoners and half the planet's indigenous captives. Now he'd begun the colossal task of restoring both the Nova ships and the prize vessels seized from the Mad Titan and his warlord. Captain Rahim? Lucian prompted as the officer inclined his head. Principal Lucian, the captain replied with formal courtesy. First, allow me to express the patrol's gratitude for liberating us. Our ships and our people owe you a great debt. Lucian nodded, motioning toward the half-repaired hangar. I'm glad to help, Your fleet is impressive. The Dark Star and the battle cruisers from Thanos' armada are among the finest warships in known space. With proper maintenance, they could turn the tide of any conflict. Captain Rahim's dark eyes gleamed. Indeed, but there is a matter more urgent than fleet expansion. We bear a summons from the Supreme, an invitation you must not refuse. Lucian paused, glancing at the swirling repair wards. The ships around him represented gargantuan wealth and power. They could be sold to fund his school or integrated into its armada. But the Supreme's summons hinted at a destiny greater than mere military advantage. "All right," he said at last, shouldering his cloak. "Lead the way. Let us see what this Supreme has in store." As Lucian followed Captain Rahim toward the waiting patrol ship, the repaired battlecraft gleamed behind him, silent witnesses to a new chapter in the galaxy's unfolding saga. "Collect!" With a single gesture, Lucian retrieved a small box inscribed with faint, glowing runes, the interior enchanted by a traceless extension spell to hold far more than its outward dimensions suggested. One by one, he placed the repaired warships and starfighters inside. When the last vessel settled within, he snapped the lid shut and turned to the approaching officer. "Apologies for the delay," he said, offering a wry smile. "I'm Lucian of Turlan Star." Captain Fran, who'd been rooted to the spot in stunned silence, blinked and hurried forward. He dropped into a respectful bow. "Not at all, Lord Lucian. Had you not arrived, we would have been lost. I am Fran, captain of the 8th Fleet in the Patrol Division. On behalf of the Nova Empire, I extend our deepest gratitude." Fran's voice trembled with genuine awe. Tales of Lucian's exploits had spread across the galaxy, how he single-handedly annihilated the combined Thanos-Ronan armada and beheaded both warlords in a display of power likened only to the ancient gods themselves. Even the Empire's staunchest supremes conducted themselves with utmost caution in his presence. Lucian waved away the praise with a casual shrug. It was simply a matter of convenience. Besides, who could ignore a planet thrown into turmoil by a bounty announcement? He offered the rune-etched box to Fran. The captain, tealing himself, peered inside and recoiled at the sight of the severed heads of Thanos and Ronan. "I rarely leave Turlan," Lucian continued, his tone light. "This is my first venture beyond my home world. Gamora told me that the Nova Empire stands as the mightiest power in the Milky Way. This is my gift to your empire." Fran's hand shook as he lifted the lid on the box. Inside lay the severed heads of Thanos and Ronan. He swallowed hard, fighting the bile rising in his throat, then carefully closed the lid and handed it over. Lucian met his gaze. "Thank you, Commander." Fran bowed slightly. "Sir, I have already reported everything to the Nova Supreme. His Majesty would be honored if you would visit Xandar, the Imperial capital, at your earliest convenience. Might you have the time?" The implications were staggering. Thanos had fallen, Ronan had perished, and their entire armada lay in ruins. News of such a decisive victory would send shockwaves through every corner of the universe. Even the Nova Supreme had been taken aback by the report. Yet for the Nova Empire, this was nothing less than a triumph. Thanos had long been a malignant threat to galactic stability. With him gone, allies and neutral powers alike would breathe easier. Ronan, ever the Kree militant hawk, had been a ruthless adversary. His death would only hasten a formal peace between the Kree Empire and Nova. Fran's voice betrayed a mixture of relief and awe. "His Majesty is deeply grateful, Lucian. He wishes to extend his personal thanks, and if you agree, to forge a lasting friendship between you and the Empire. A being of your power is invaluable as an ally. We cannot afford to make an enemy of you." Lucian nodded, slipping the box of heads under his arm. "Then it seems I have a visit to plan. Please convey my acceptance and my conditions." As Fran hurried off to relay the news, Lucian allowed himself a faint smile. The Nova Empire's invitation was more than gratitude. It was an opportunity. In the balance of cosmic power, he intended to make sure that opportunity swung decidedly in his favor. Lucian smiled. "Of course I have time. I just want to speak with the Supreme about something." He accepted Fran's invitation without hesitation. Since resolving Thanos' hidden threat on Earth, Lucian's next priority was to open formal talks with the Nova Empire. He wanted their cooperation to help Earth enter the cosmic age and begin interstellar resettlement as soon as possible. Fran visibly relaxed at Lucian's agreement. His mission from the Supreme had been to secure Lucian's presence in the capital, but if Lucian had refused, Fran would have been powerless. "Very good, Mr. Lucian," Fran said. "Let's depart tomorrow. That will give us time to wrap up things here." The two men spent the rest of the day coordinating with the surviving planetary officials, requisitioning communication arrays, and filing a full report on Thanos' assault. Thanks to the Nova Empire's efficient crisis response protocols, they only needed 24 hours to stabilize the situation. After that, all that remained was to await the arrival of the Empire's logistical support fleet to handle reconstruction and resettlement. With every report sent and every directive issued, Lucian felt the future of Earth drawing one step closer, a future where humanity would stand alongside the stars, backed by the might of the Nova Empire. And when they took off for the capital tomorrow, he would finally have his audience with the Supreme. The planet still stands, with half its people gone, but unlike so many others Thanos visited, its resources remain untouched. In the short term, the survivors' standard of living has even improved. Of course, few would call these circumstances a blessing. 30 minutes ago, in Xandar's capital, Nova Supreme Asha convened an emergency council. Every senior officer had been summoned as soon as Fran's report arrived. Asha stood at the head of the long conference table and laid out the facts. "As you know, this world lost half its population, yet we still can't roll all its resources. In neighboring systems, entire worlds have been stripped bare. In the short run, our people may prosper, but at what cost to their souls?" She paused, letting that sink in. Then she held up the datapad Fran had sent. "And now we have a new threat. Fran encountered something on Turlin." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Turlin was a backwater planet, its technology barely beyond primitive, its people never having joined interstellar civilization. No one in the Empire had ever reached out to them before. Asha's eyes narrowed. "Fran describes an entity so powerful it slew both the Sarnos and Ronin fleets single-handedly. It wields abilities that can only be called magic. In all my years, I've heard legends of the ancient gods of Turlin, but I believed the myth. Now I'm not so sure. What do you make of this god from Turlin?" Silence fell as the officials exchanged uneasy glances. If Fran's report was true, they faced something far beyond any conventional threat, perhaps beyond anything they had ever imagined. Normally, whenever the Empire encounters a civilization that's technologically undeveloped, our standard policy is to initiate contact, share our advancements, and then integrate that world into the Imperial system. In the annals of the Empire, the planet Turlin has long fallen under the sway of the God Realm, and records tell of numerous powerful ancient deities who once walked its surface. So when the Reverend Nova first received word of Lucian's astonishing feats on Turlin, she naturally assumed he must be one of those ancient gods come to life again. In the Imperial Council chamber, she shared the news. "I believe this development could work to our advantage," she said. "Our peace negotiations with the Kree Empire have been stalled by Ronin's faction for months. With Ronin's death, the treaty should finally move forward unhindered." A senior official leaned forward. "Precisely, Reverend. Now is the perfect moment to extend our hand in goodwill." Another council member nodded in agreement. "Supreme, if we invited this ancient god to Xandar as an honored guest, we'd not only show our gratitude, but also gain a powerful ally." Reverend Nova smiled. "I've been considering the same. Bring Lucian here. Let us welcome him properly and secure his friendship in the process." Chapter 1. The Kree Empire was desperate for peace. It simply could not endure fighting the Nova Empire and the Skrull Empire at the same time. Even though the Nova forces were engaged only with the Kree, the gap in strength and the relentless grind of war had pushed them to the breaking point. In fact, the Nova Command secretly longed to end hostilities and rebuild its forces even more urgently than the Kree did. That's why the Kree High Council had set its sights on Lucian, the ancient god. If they could convince him to join their cause, it would speed the war's conclusion and, just as crucially, secure the Empire's future against any lingering threats. Chapter 424, Big News in the Universe. Update 1. The Grand Council chamber fell into thoughtful silence as Lucian, the newly appointed Supreme of the Nova Empire, finished outlining his proposal. He met each delegate's gaze before adding, If this ancient god is genuinely willing to cooperate and come to the capital, we shouldn't keep it secret. We need to broadcast the news to every major empire at once. A representative from the first high-ranking empire rose to speak. "You're right, Supreme," he said, voice echoing off the vaulted walls. "Our peace treaty with the Kree has stalled long enough. Hawks like Ronin in the Kree leadership have been sabotaging negotiations at every turn. At the same time, the Skrulls and the Shar have been making subtle moves behind the scenes. Announcing that an ancient god may align with us would send a powerful deterrent message, one strong enough to force Kree hardliners to back down. And even if the god ultimately declines our invitation, the mere possibility will have accomplished what we need, breathing new life into peace talks." The council murmured in agreement. It was no secret that the Skrull Empire did not want the Nova and Kree empires to reconcile. A truce would leave the Skrulls facing Kree retaliation alone. And though the Shi'ar publicly claimed neutrality, they quietly hoped the three empires would exhaust each other in conflict, allowing Shi'ar forces to swoop in for the spoils. Lucian nodded. "Very well. Since we're all on the same page, let Ambassador Fran extend the formal invitation, prepare the announcement draft, and ready our emissaries. Once the word goes out, there'll be no turning back." With that decree, the Nova Empire's chamber sprang into coordinated action, setting the stage for a diplomatic maneuver that could reshape the balance of power across the stars. As soon as Fran's invitation to Lucian was confirmed, the Imperial Intelligence Directorate sprang into action. Word of the upcoming summit was broadcast across the known universe, while the Reception Bureau began arranging every detail to the highest standard: lavish quarters, state-of-the-art security, and the finest diplomatic courtesies, so that Lucian would feel the full extent of the Empire's respect and sincerity. Within 30 minutes, the Nova Supreme Council had finalized the protocol. By the time Fran sent Lucian's acceptance, the entire Empire was already humming with preparations. Less than half a day later, the announcement had reached every major galaxy, every news network, and even the most remote backwater worlds. Sarnos, the Mad Titan, was dead. Sarnos, the ruthless warlord whose name had once struck terror into the hearts of billions, whose fleet had been unmatched in scale and whose conquests had humbled entire empires, had fallen not to a coalition armada, but to a single ancient god from the mysterious Turlan star. Enraged when Sarnos placed a 1 billion credit bounty on anyone who could find the legendary cosmic cube there, the god descended upon the Titan's armada and obliterated it, Titan and ships alike, in one cataclysmic strike. Now, in the wake of his sudden demise, the power balance of the universe teeters on the brink of upheaval, and at the center of it all stands Lucian, en route to a meeting that every corner of the galaxy is watching with bated breath. Lucian stood at the observation deck, watching the tranquil glow of distant stars, and yet nothing felt peaceful. News had spread across the galaxy that the ancient god, enraged by the machinations of the Iron Warlord Sarnos, had abandoned his home world of Turlan Prime in fury and unleashed his power upon Sarnos' armada, obliterating every ship in its path. At the same time, this primordial force had saved a helpless frontier planet on the very edge of the Nova Empire, shielding it from certain annihilation. Word of these events traveled faster than any starship. When the supreme ruler of the Nova Empire learned that the ancient god had not only destroyed Sarnos' fleet, but also intervened to spare one of his border worlds, he publicly invited the deity to his capital. Rumors of their purported alliance sent ripples through every polity, from the greatest star empires down to the humblest mining outposts. Across the ruined worlds once terrorized by Sarnos, survivors celebrated as though the sun itself had returned. They burned effigies of the tyrant, wept tears of relief, and offered songs of thanks to the ancient god. Since his wrath had originated from Turlan Prime, people everywhere began to view Turlan civilization with newfound respect and even reverence. Merchant houses and deep space freighters flew flags bearing Turlan symbols in tribute. Refugee colonies scrawled "Welcome, Ancient God of Turlan" on battered starport walls. Meanwhile, the major powers of the galaxy, each commanding standing armies of 10,000 battle-hardened troops, scrambled their intelligence networks. Admirals and war counselors convened emergency sessions, scrutinizing every scrap of information to determine whether the alliance between the Nova Empire and the ancient god was genuine or merely a prelude to a new cosmic threat. In that turbulent moment, Lucian realized how precarious the balance of power had become. 3 great nations each mustered 10,000 combat veterans, and yet his own Legion of the Silver Dawn, a force he'd built from nothing, numbered only half that size. Alone, he commanded 5,000 warriors. Though outmanned, Lucian knew that his legion's loyalty and training could tip the scales in the conflicts to come. He closed his eyes, feeling the hum of the star chart interface beneath his fingertips, and resolved to prepare for whatever shockwave of events the ancient god's emergence might trigger next. The galactic balance was delicate. If any 2 factions ever forged an alliance, the third would have to proceed with extreme caution. One day later, aboard Station K-9852, Lucian stood before Yondu, Star-Lord, Gamora, and the rest of their crew. He met each of their eyes in turn, then spoke in a clear, steady voice. "I've already transferred 100 million credits to each of you," he began. "Now you have 2 choices. Option 1, you take the money, walk away, and return to your old lives. I'll drop all charges related to the stolen Cosmic Cube, no questions asked. Option 2, you officially join the Academy's Cosmoguard. Come with me to Xandar and help usher Earth into the Cosmic Era. We've all been allies so far, so it's entirely up to you." A few hours earlier, Lucian had uploaded incontrovertible video footage and still images of his decisive victory over Thanos, along with the necessary interstellar credentials. Within moments, the 1.8 billion credit bounty cleared into his newly opened account. True to his word, he immediately withdrew $500 million and handed out generous shares to Yondu, Star-Lord, Gamora, and the other 5 members of their band. "The transport's ready," he added, nodding toward the hangar bay. "Fran will pilot us to Xandar. If you decide not to come, no hard feelings. We'll part as friends. But if you stay, together we'll write Earth's next great chapter among the stars." Lucian let his gaze linger on Gamora. "You helped me kill Sarnos and avenge him. That's reward enough. I don't want the 100 million credits. I'll take the second option." Gamora had already made up her mind before Lucian even spoke. She simply nodded. Star-Lord, still hesitating, glanced between them and quickly said, "Count me in for the second choice as well." Peter's reasons were straightforward. He'd long dreamed of leaving Yondu's Ravager crew behind. He fancied himself a gentleman thief, not a cutthroat pirate. This trip to Earth had reconnected him with his only living relative, an uncle whose years were numbered. He needed that time. Above all, Peter realized he'd fallen in love with Gamora. Truly fallen, not just chasing a fling. He wanted a chance to build a life with her. Rocket Raccoon scuffed the deck with one boot, eyes darting around. "I've seen creatures like me on Earth, animals you can't find anywhere else, see in the galaxy. That's worth more to me than any pile of credits." With that, all 3 Guardians made their choice. They would forego the money and claim the second reward. Maybe Earth really is my home, Lucian thought, though that was only the excuse he fed himself. The real reason ran deeper. He didn't want to lose the sense of belonging he'd found adventuring with Star-Lord and the others, the same warmth he'd first felt among Lila's friends. He wasn't ready to let that go. Nearby, Groot declared in his usual fashion, "I am Groot." Simple as ever, he followed Rocket's lead without question. Rocket flashed a grin. "Then I'll take the first option too. Free agents like us were born for the open road, not someone's pay grade. Besides, I've got too many people counting on me." Yondu gave a casual shrug. "Fair enough, but if you ever need Ravager support, you know where to find us." Lucian smiled to himself. No sum of credits could ever tempt him into someone else's service. His real family was out there, the Ravagers who'd torn him from Kree slavery and shown him true freedom. That was home. "All right then," he said, tugging on his jacket. "Let's get moving. Fran's waiting." With that, Lucian fell into step with his chosen family, ready for whatever came next. Lucian glanced at Nebula, standing beside Gamora, and at Drax the Destroyer lounging nearby, then let out a quiet sigh. Without Mantis, we're really just the Guardians of the Galaxy. Nebula and Drax, still indebted to him for saving their lives, were eager to repay the favor. Without hesitation, they both volunteered to join his team. Chapter 425, The Highest Reception Standard, Update 2. The Nova battleship lifted off from Station K-9852 and set a course for the nearest hyperspace jump point. In the ship's observation lounge, Lucian stood before the viewport, marveling at the glittering tapestry of stars stretching into infinity. According to Fran's calculations, even by the most direct route, it would take 3 days to reach the capital world of Xandar. Principal, take a look at this. Gamora appeared at his side, holding a sleek data module. As the universe's premier intelligence operative, she was always abreast of the latest developments. Lucian activated the holoscreen. Projected before them was an official Nova Empire communique. The ancient god Lucian of Turlan had slain Thanos and now offered to join forces with the Empire. "It seems our journey will be trouble-free," Gamora observed. Lucian allowed himself a small, confident smile. The Nova Empire's public announcement left no doubt. They genuinely sought his cooperation. Their interests aligned perfectly. The Empire planned to wield his legendary reputation as a deterrent against hostile powers and to broker a lasting peace, while Lucian needed Nova's support to usher Earth into the cosmic age and oversee the resettlement of its population among the stars. With their objectives so neatly intertwined, his arrival in Xandar promised to herald a powerful new alliance. Lucian allowed himself a faint smile. This really was a win-win situation. The Nova Empire wouldn't have issued such vague rumors without running them by him first. They weren't petty enough to brew trouble in the capital behind his back. He wasn't a child. He'd sort this out quickly, then return to Earth and devote himself entirely to mastering magic. Despite his current glory, he knew he was far from the top of the Marvel cosmos. There were countless single-universe powerhouses, multiversal titans, and beyond them, super-universal and omnipotent entities. If he didn't keep growing stronger, he and Earth would be helpless prey to the next planet-devouring threat that drifted by. As for being labeled an ancient god? Fine. If people needed that title to comprehend how a mere human could wield such might, so be it. The name carried weight and served as an excellent deterrent. 3 days later, just as Lucian had been told, a gleaming silver planet materialized before him. Lucian stared at the gleaming world before him. In the movie, the dark star had barreled naked through space, but this silver planet was surrounded by swarms of battleships and layers of defense arrays, tech so advanced he couldn't fully decipher it. This wasn't the peaceful interlude he'd seen on screen. The war between the Nova Empire and the Kree Empire still raged, and Xandar's orbital shields were tighter than ever. Had Ronan attempted to bring the Dark Star here now, he'd have been vaporized long before breaching the atmosphere. Never underestimate one of the 4 great empires, Lucian reminded himself. The disparity in firepower was staggering. He flicked through mental images of Earth's rusty tanks and howitzers and shook his head. At first glance, planetary wars in this part of the galaxy seemed less deadly, often confined to a single world's destruction or an entire system wiped out in interstellar battles. But Earth's peril felt altogether more profound. A conflict here could unravel the very fabric of the universe itself. In that sense, humanity's threat level dwarfed any war waged among the stars. Lucian had once planned to spirit his friends away from Earth, to some quiet, uncharted world where they could study magic in peace. But when he picked up Fran's distress signal, he dropped that idea without a second thought. Before long, the Imperial patrol warships converged on Xandar. At Lucian's request, the capital's guard fleet split neatly into 2 columns, parting the void like a royal procession and clearing a direct path to the planet below. "Mr. Lucian," Fran breathed, staring in wonder at the gleaming ships. "I've never been treated like this before." As head of the provincial constabulary on a remote border world, he was used to rusty patrol cutters and backwater garrisons, nothing like this honor guard. Imperial guards in polished armor stood at rigid attention along the corridor, their lance-like weapons leveled skyward to frame his approach. Word had already reached the palace. In a few hours, the Emperor himself would receive him. Star-Lord leaned in beside Rocket, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Would you look at that? Our little border cop's becoming big news in the capital." Rocket gave a high-pitched laugh. "Yeah, and me, the galaxy's most wanted raccoon, getting front-row seats to all this pomp and circumstance." They exchanged amused glances as Lucian guided the convoy into Xandar's orbit under the watchful eyes of thousands of Imperial troops, proof that sometimes answering a friend's call was worth more than any lone pursuit of magic. Lucian could hardly believe how small he once felt in the universe, yet now, by simply traveling with Star-Lord, he was granted the kind of reception only the galaxy's true movers and shakers ever enjoyed. He couldn't hide his excitement as Star-Lord clapped him on the shoulder. "Don't get too comfortable just yet," he teased. "In the days ahead, you'll be rubbing shoulders with even bigger names." Lucian smiled and shook his head. The planet Xandar, capital of the Nova Empire, has only one city, Five-Star City, and from orbit its sprawling metropolis forms a perfect 5-point star. It's a breathtaking sight. The Empire spans millions of worlds, so unlike Earth, it needs no endless network of cities. Most planets are either designated nature reserves or strategic military outposts. Their patrol ship, flanked by a Nova frigate, descended slowly onto the landing platform at the Empire's magnificent headquarters. Beneath soaring crystal spires, Lucian was introduced to the Nova Supreme, the absolute ruler of the Empire, and a host of high-ranking dignitaries. Over the next 3 days, he was treated to every conceivable luxury, experiencing firsthand why Xandar is considered the most advanced world in known space. At last, the time came for departure. Boarding the ship alongside Star-Lord and his crew, Lucian reflected on the fragile alliance they'd forged. The Nova Empire demanded his unique deterrent power, and in return, he needed their unrivaled support to guide Earth safely into the cosmic age. As the engines roared to life, Lucian allowed himself one satisfied grin. His journey among the stars was only just beginning. The two sides' interests aligned perfectly. No concessions were needed, so the negotiations wrapped up in under an hour. As Temple 2 slipped free of Xandar's orbit, Lucian leaned over Star-Lord, who was at the helm. "Don't head back to Earth," he said. "Chart a course for Morag." Once they'd cleared Xandar, Lucian settled into the co-pilot's seat. He'd just sold the Dark Star to the Nova Empire while on Xandar, padding his coffers. Earth's entry into the cosmic era demanded vast sums. He couldn't always rely on Nova alone to bankroll his ambitions. Meanwhile, Temple 2 had finished its extensive magical refit and was ready for action. "Morag," Lucian mused aloud. "That's the junk planet, right? I thought it was worthless." Peter Quill glanced over, amused. "Worthless is one way to put it. Morag used to be the capital of one of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Then, without warning, it was destroyed. The oceans rose and swallowed the whole planet. Every 300 years, the sea recedes just enough to reveal the ancient city ruins, and scavengers from across the star lanes descend to pick through the wreckage." Lucian nodded, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "Good. We'll see what treasures or trouble await us there." By all accounts, Mogra's ocean won't retreat again for years. Right now, the planet is nothing but open water, its depths prowled by deadly sea monsters. "Go find it," Lucian said, offering no further explanation. He smiled, utterly untroubled. With the creature, as of the deep, fully exposed, slipping in to seize the power gem would be a breeze. And in any case, neither sea nor monster posed a threat to him. If his memory served, the legendary Power Stone was buried somewhere on Mogra, and its civilization had fallen long ago because it couldn't contain the stone's immense power. Chapter 426, Battle and Creation. Among the 6 Infinity Stones, the Power Stone is by far the most formidable. Wielded on its own, it can annihilate an entire planet. Combined with the others, it magnifies their abilities to inconceivable levels. Until now, Lucian had paid them little mind. Outside his own universe, they were mere curiosities, beautiful but harmless. But recent events forced him to reconsider. It wasn't that Lucian coveted the stones for their legendary power. Rather, he understood that if anyone else were to collect more than one, the balance of the cosmos could shift dangerously. A single stone posed little threat, but multiple stones in the wrong hands would be catastrophic. Since the Power Stone had already revealed itself in this realm, Lucian decided to secure it immediately. He slipped it into his personal pocket dimension, this where he already kept the Space Stone and the Mind Stone. As of now, Power Stone, stashed in Lucian's pocket dimension. Space Stone, stashed in Lucian's pocket dimension. Mind Stone, stashed in Lucian's pocket dimension. Time Stone, held by the Ancient One. Reality Stone, still sealed away. Soulstone, scattered somewhere across the universe. Even if someone manages to track down the Soulstone and pass its mysterious trial, wielding it alone won't threaten Lucian. But as for the other stones, he would not allow these cosmic weapons to fall into any other hands. With the power, space, and mind stones safely under his watch, he was now ready for whatever challenge the universe dared to throw at him next. Lucian paused to reconsider his plans. After all, although the Infinity Stones draw on forces beyond any single mage's power, possessing one could turn the tide against an enemy far stronger than himself. And down the road, when his magical abilities reached a higher level, he might even unlock new insights into the cosmic laws bound within each stone. With that in mind, he altered course. Instead of racing on to the next world, he would make a one-day detour to Mogra and claim the Power Stone for himself. 24 hours later, the starship Temple 2 coasted into orbit above Mogra, a planet swathed entirely beneath deep, churning oceans. Lucian stood at the viewport, summoned his spirit guardian apparition to his side, closed his eyes, and unleashed his telepathic sense. Even sealed within the cosmic spirit sphere, the Power Stone thrummed with such intensity that its presence could not be masked. Lucian let his mind drift outward, probing the sea until the stone's signature blazed in his awareness. "I've got it," he whispered. Another hour of careful scanning narrowed the location to a submerged reef deep below the waves. Lucian opened his eyes and intoned the words of his transformation spell. His body shimmered and lengthened, scales forming along his limbs until he resembled a massive, streamlined fish. With a single powerful leap through the observation dome, he dove into Mogra's dark waters. Lucian knew the hardest part was just beginning. Soon, he would stand before the Power Stone itself. Lucian's transformation magic had long since reached an impressive level. He could assume almost any form he wished. The catch was that, while transformed, he couldn't access the full depth of his magical reserves. Still, that limitation mattered little when facing the sea's horrors. In truth, he rarely needed magic at all. His innate powers were more than a match for any leviathan below the waves. No sooner did a school of voracious fish or a lumbering sea monster close in than Lucian's body crackled with electricity. With a flash, lightning arced through his flesh and fins, electrocuting every creature within reach. In his electric eel guise, currents of raw power danced along his sleek form, propelling him through the water with astonishing speed. It wasn't long before he came upon a palace carved of pearl-white coral, its columns spiraling toward a vaulted ceiling of living crystal. At the center, atop an ornate pedestal, rested the cosmic spirit ball Hu, the coveted power gem. Lucian's heart leapt. Gently, he lifted the orb and tucked it into his dimensional dressing space, where it would remain both safe and concealed. With the gem secured, he shifted back into his human shape and with a thought teleported aboard Temple 2. "All right," he announced, "let's set course for Earth." Star-Lord and the others exchanged puzzled looks. None of them knew precisely what Lucian had retrieved from the ocean's depths. But they obeyed without question, guiding Temple 2 toward the jump point. 5 days later, the ship slipped out of hyperspace into Earth's orbit. In the conference chamber, Lucian summarized the mission's key findings for Professor X and the rest of the team. Once the briefing was complete, he sank into his chair, ready to hand off the next steps and finally enjoy a moment's rest. The Nova Empire's protocols for bringing a pre-industrial world into the interstellar community are legendary for their precision, and when Professor Xavier and Agent Coulson serve as liaisons, there's virtually no room for error. If Earth's leaders choose to cooperate, they'll benefit from the Empire's advanced technology and guidance. If they don't, well, the Nova Empire can be very persuasive. After all, their true ally is Lucian, not the governments of Earth, and it's only through Lucian's efforts that humanity stands on the threshold of the cosmic age. Should any heads of state prove stubborn, Professor Xavier and Agent Coulson have the full weight of the Empire behind them to encourage compliance. Meanwhile, in Sakura Kinomoto's world, another chapter has closed. With the final Clow card captured, Sakura and Xiaoran Li have fulfilled their quest, and the card's power now rests safely in Sakura's hands. Friday evening, around the dinner table in Lucian's home, the mood was calm and domestic. Li Xiaoran set down his chopsticks with a polite but eager air. "Grandfather," he said, looking across the table, "Sakura and Tomoyo have invited us to Tokyo tomorrow." Li Meiling, seated beside her cousin, dropped her own chopsticks and flashed Lucian an enthusiastic smile, clearly hoping he'd agree at once. Lucian leaned back in his chair, studying the two young faces lit by warm lamplight. "Tomorrow, Tokyo, old friends, new memories." It was a simple request, but for Lucian, it carried the promise of something rare, the chance to step away, if only briefly, from the weight of interstellar diplomacy and imperial expectations, and just be a grandfather again. Lucian called out after them, "Go on, bring more cash. Guys shouldn't be stingy on dates, and don't forget to stay safe." He grinned, waved his hand, and watched as the dishes on the table floated neatly into the sink, washed themselves, and stacked away. Then he drew a Clow card from his pocket and handed it to Xiaoran. "I've nearly finished studying this doubt card. Could you return it to Sakura tomorrow? And while you're at it, see if you can borrow the creation card next." Not long after Xiaoran had sealed the Thunder card, his spirited cousin Li Meiling tracked him down here. Since they all trained under the same master, Lucian naturally kept an eye on them both. Over time, Xiaoran and Sakura's friendship deepened, especially following their trip to Hong Kong to visit their families. It felt as though nothing could keep them apart now. Because of that closeness, Lucian found it easy to borrow Sakura's Clow cards for his research. Still, he never wanted to interfere with, and certainly not slow down, their card-gathering mission. He always took only one card at a time, moving on to the next only when he'd squeezed every last insight from the one in his possession. Beyond that, he let Sakura and Xiaoran pursue their destiny together without further interference. This trial was merely a game that Clow Reed had devised for his son. There was no real danger involved. Lucian's purpose was to delve into the remnants of Clow's magic, particularly the Clow cards, each one a distilled fragment of the great mage's power. Lately, all his eye had been on the fighting card, a unique enchantment said to encapsulate the martial prowess of every warrior on Earth. In theory, even someone with zero training who activated this card would instantly become a world-class combatant. Until now, Lucian's unarmed skills were laughably basic. He could barely bat bricks with any finesse. He had relied purely on raw strength and quick reflexes to intimidate weaker foes, and in truth, his close-quarters ability barely exceeded that of a normal person. The slight improvement he did possess came from dubious experiments in a mutant laboratory. Against a seasoned fighter like Captain, he would be down for the count within minutes. Although Lucian's true strength lay in ranged magic, he knew it was unwise to neglect hand-to-hand combat. Mastering the fighting card would compensate for his glaringness in melee. And now, after weeks of study and relentless practice, he was on the verge of unlocking the card's full potential. As long as Lucian kept the combat enchantment active, his already impressive physique would be amplified to the point that he could overwhelm even a seasoned fighter like Captain America. But the card he truly longed to master next was the creation card, an artifact of incomparable value. True to its name, this card grants its wielder the power to bring anything into existence. The moment it's invoked, an empty tome appears. Whatever is written within its pages materializes instantly in the real world. It is, quite literally, the purest expression of creation's laws. Should Lucian ever unlock all its secrets, he might one day fashion an entire world of his own design. The deeper he studied the Clow cards, the more awed he became by the genius of Clow Reed. No wonder the legendary sorcerer was able to forestall Yuko's death and even summon a being on par with Fei Wong Reed, simply through the sheer force of his will. Chapter 427, Contact and Probing, Second Update. Grandpa, let's go. Early the next morning, Li Xiaolong and Li Meiling slung their backpacks over their shoulders, called out to Lucian, and hurried off to meet Xiao Ying and Jize. As he watched the two youngsters disappear around the corner, Lucian muttered to himself, "Looks like a dream card is due to appear today. If we capture it, we'll have 52 of the 53 Clow cards, only one left. Maybe I should try contacting Hiragisawa Ario in advance." So far, Xiao Ying and Xiaolong have already collected 47 cards, leaving just 6 more to complete the set. With all 53 in hand, Lucian would have effectively studied each one, but truly mastering the magical principles behind them would easily take over a decade at his current pace. To shortcut that long haul, he'd need more than cross-dimensional research. He'd have to find Hiragisawa Ario, the living reincarnation of Clow Reed. Now hailed as the world's most powerful magician and bearing most of Reed's soul and memories, Ario holds the key to unlocking the card's deepest secrets. Before leaving one world for another, Clow Reed split his soul. One half was reborn in Kinomoto Fujitaka, Sakura's father, and the other in Hiragisawa Ario. Though Ario wasn't as powerful as Clow Reed at his peak, he had Clow's memories to guide him and gradually mastered every magical principle behind the Clow cards. Lucian knew that if he could find a way to collaborate with Ario, he'd accelerate his own understanding of the card's deepest secrets. That evening, just after Sioran and Mei Ling returned from Tokyo Tower, they presented Lucian with the newly captured creation card. Over dinner, they recounted their mission. As he'd predicted, they'd also secured the Dream card, a Clow card of immense power that reveals future events through slumber. Satisfied, Lucian spent the next 3 days poring over spellbooks and practicing incantations, determined to unlock everything the creation card could teach him. On the third night, while they ate, Sioran looked up from his bowl and teased, "So, are you planning to play Sleeping Beauty?" Lucian blinked. It turned out the school talent show was this weekend, and Xiaoran's class would perform a stage adaptation of Sleeping Beauty. Every part had been assigned by drawing lots, and it seemed Lucian was next in line for a role. Xiaolong drew Sleeping Beauty from the hat, and Xiao Ying ended up with the prince. "Why do I always have to be the villain?" Xiao Ying huffed, crossing her arms. "I want to be Sleeping Beauty and have Xiaolong as my prince." At the side of the table, Mei Ling poked at her rice with her chopsticks. Her shoulders slumped. She'd pulled the part of the Black Witch, the story's evil sorceress. "No way you're switching," someone replied firmly. Lucian watched Mei Ling out of the corner of his eye and shook his head quietly. He knew Mei Ling had a soft spot for Xiaolong, but they were cousins, and in the Li family's strict Taoist tradition, marriage between cousins was strictly forbidden. Even without Xiao Ying in the picture, Mei Ling could never become Xiaolong's bride. Besides, Lucian suspected her feelings weren't romantic attraction so much as a protective, big sister fondness. After all, she was still a kid. He closed his mouth and let the moment pass. Sometimes the best way to handle a tender heart is to give it room to grow. Lucian leaned back in his chair, fingertips steepled beneath his chin as he contemplated the future of the Li family. As their honored ancestor, it was his duty to guide these young bloodlines. Once he'd fully mastered the magic of all 53 Clow cards, he planned to pass on his meditation techniques, Taoist rituals, and carefully honed spells. With the family's power strengthened, everyone would flourish, and his legacy would endure. A soft knock at the study door interrupted his thoughts. Li Xiaolong poked his head inside, anxiety flitting across his face. "Ancestor, will you be able to come watch the talent show?" he asked. Since their mother was away in Hong Kong, Xiaolong and his sisters, Xiao Ying and Mei Ling, needed Lucian in the audience to fulfill the contest requirement that parents be present. Lucian smiled and rose to his feet. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I'll be there to cheer for all 3 of you." As he walked toward the door, Lucian's mind drifted to the centerpiece of the evening, the Clow card performance. Rumor had it they'd be summoning the Light card, a peerless symbol of illumination and hope. Among the Clow cards, the Light card ranks with the most potent. It embodies Yang energy, radiant as the sun, just as their guardian beast Kerberos governs all light. In the classical schema of elements, light itself fuels the fires and grounds the earth. Seeing that card in action would be a rare and unforgettable spectacle. Chapter 8. Moonlight and Translucent Cards. Yin embodies the moon, its silent judgment and control over darkness. In turn, darkness weaves the threads of wind and water among the 4 elemental forces. If you master the translucent cards, you can channel that lunar power. Your command of the fairy laws and your fairy glory will flourish, and the light magic you learned from the old president will blaze brighter than ever. Only then will you stand a real chance against Morgoth in Middle-earth. It was a cool Sunday morning at Yuji Elementary School. Without warning, three figures appeared atop the roof of the main teaching building. Lucian rested a hand on each child's head, offering a gentle smile. "You two," he said to Xiaolong and Mei Ling, "go change into your costumes and get ready. I'll head down into the audience to watch your performance." Xiaolong grinned, and Mei Ling saluted with mock saloon flair. As they slipped away, Lucian descended the fire escape stairs and began a leisurely stroll through the deserted hallways. Though the children's show was important, his true purpose lay elsewhere. Today, he hoped to speak with the school's most enigmatic teacher, Guanyue Gefan. He found her in the quiet staff lounge, where she was arranging porcelain teacups on a silver tray. The morning light caught her serene expression, and for a moment Lucian felt as if he were gazing at the moon itself. "Good morning, Teacher Gefan," he said. "I came for the performance, of course, but mostly I wanted to talk about those translucent cards." Gefan paused and poured 2 cups of jasmine tea. "I've been expecting you, Lucian. The cards you seek do more than store spells. They channel pure lunar essence. With them, you can bind darkness, wind, and water under Yin's authority. But mastering their secrets is no simple feat." Lucian accepted his cup. He took a measured sip, then met her eyes. "My fairy glory and the light magic I learned from the old president both need a new spark. With your guidance, I believe we can awaken that power and face Morgoth with confidence." A slow smile curved Gefan's lips. She reached up to adjust the hairpin at her temple, shaped like a crescent moon. "Before we begin, there's something you should know about me." Her voice softened, as though sharing a cherished memory. "I am also Kanzuki Utaho, Shrine Maiden of Tsukumine Shrine. In another life, I served as a math teacher. In fact, I was an educational intern for Tuya Kinomoto during his junior high years. We even dated for a year before parting on good terms." Lucian's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You and Tuya?" Utaho inclined her head. "Yes, but my path led me here, to guide young mages like Xiaolong and Mei Ling. Their performance isn't just a recital, it's the first step toward unlocking their true potential." With that, she motioned to a low table where a fan of shimmering cards lay spread out. Faint silver sigils danced across their surfaces. "These are the translucent cards," she said. "Touch one, and you'll feel the moonlight stir within you." Lucian reached out, fingertips brushing a card's edge. A pulse of cool energy raced through him, bright and invigorating. He glanced at Utaho, resolve burning in his eyes. "Then let us begin." Beyond the windows, the schoolyard buzzed with students gathering for the matinee. Yet far more consequential lessons were unfolding here, in the silent communion of light and shadow, under the watchful gaze of the judge moon. The true test had begun. Lucian unfolded the letter one more time, letting its edges brush against his palm. After the breakup, his former fiancée had gone to study in the UK, where, by a twist of fate, she'd met Ario Hiragi. They'd fallen in love, and now she was back in Japan as a substitute teacher at Tomoeda Elementary. Ario had asked her to help Sakura complete the moon trial. Without her here, Sakura would have to wait another 3 or 4 months for his arrival. Lucian glanced past a cluster of blooming cherry trees and spotted Tuya Kinomoto hurrying down the path. "Tuya," he called, raising a hand. "Has your uncle arrived yet?" Tuya slowed and shook his head. "He's still at the excavation site. He felt bad about leaving mid-dig, so he asked me to send him plenty of photos of Sakura's performance." Lucian nodded, tucking the letter into his jacket. "Understood." They fell into step through the school gates. The courtyard was already alive with the chatter of children, their voices carried on the spring breeze. Just beyond the main building, 2 figures emerged, tall, lean silhouettes that stood out even in the daylight crowd. Lucian halted. One was clad in a tailored school blazer, the other wore a flowing, dark overcoat that hinted at shapes shifting beneath. Despite their youth, an almost palpable aura of magic radiated from them. "You must be Judge Yu and Sakura's brother?" Lucian guessed, bowing slightly. Yu inclined his head, eyes as bright as a crescent moon. Tuya offered a polite nod. "In the flesh," Tuya said. "We were just on our way to the teacher's office. Care to join us?" Lucian followed them past rows of classroom doors, his mind already racing with possibilities. With Ario's trusted agents on campus and the moon trial looming ahead, the next few weeks promised to be anything but ordinary. Lucian paused in the doorway as the soft glow of moonlight filtered through the office window. A long-haired woman was arranging scrolls and papers across her desk. When she looked up and saw him, her expression flickered with surprise. Then she stood and smiled. "If you'd like to watch tonight's performance, it's down the hall," she said, gesturing toward a set of double doors. "It should begin in about an hour." Lucian returned her smile and stepped forward. "You must be Teacher Guanyue," he said. "Xiaolong spoke highly of you, and I've heard your moon magic is quite formidable." Guan Yu's smile widened, though a hint of curiosity lingered in her eyes. When she'd first arrived at the academy, Xiaolong had been instantly wary of her. He'd suspected she was more than just a new instructor and had even considered testing her abilities. But in the end, he'd restrained himself, respecting the quiet power that her reputation suggested. Now, standing face to face, Lucian could sense that same power, and he wondered how deeply it ran. Chapter 428, I apologize for the offense, first update. "Who are you?" Lucian's question hung in the air. Guan Yu Gefen tilted his head, clearly taken aback. He knew Li Xiaolong well enough to sense the powerful magic radiating from her. Could she really be a member of the Xiangjiang Li clan? "My name is Li Xuan, head of the Li family, and Li Xiaolong's elder," he answered calmly. "Xiaolong mentioned that a teacher with unusually strong magical energy had arrived at this school, which struck me as odd. I came to see for myself." Lucian closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides. "Let's not mince words," he said. "Since you've returned from England, why have you taken a teaching post here? Is it the Clow cards you're after?" He already had his suspicions, but he couldn't let Jifan know how much he understood. The Clow cards, created by the legendary mage Clow Reed, were the most coveted magical artifacts in existence, capable of unimaginable power. As a senior member of the Li family, and Li Xiaolong's appointed guardian, Lucian was duty-bound to protect her. It was only natural to suspect that someone with Gefan's background might be seeking those cards. Guan Yugen's expression remained serene. With a slight nod, he met Lucian's gaze and spoke in a measured tone. "Your concern is understandable, but my reasons for returning aren't what you suspect. If you're willing, I'll show you proof of my true purpose." Lucian Li's sword hung at his side like a silent promise as he faced his teacher across the cluttered desk. "Li, I think you've misunderstood," Guan Yugafan insisted, her voice calm. "Whatever my purpose, I give you my word. Xiaolong will not be harmed, and it will all be over quickly. You'll understand soon enough." Lucian's golden eyes didn't soften. "Teacher Guanyue, I can't simply take your assurances at face value." She gave a patient nod, smoothing a strand of moonlit hair behind her ear. "I still don't know why Elio Hiragisawa's prophecy magic failed to foresee your arrival. The simplest explanation is that you weren't significant enough. Elio must have assumed I could manage you without special mention." "That's not good enough." Lucian's voice turned steely. "Either you give me a straight answer now, or I'll consider your silence an offense." Guan Yue's expression hardened. "Mr. Li, I truly cannot divulge more, at least not yet. If you force the issue, I will be left with no choice but to seal your memories for a few days." At those words, moonlight gathered at Guan Yue's fingertips, swirling into a low, humming power. With a deft motion, she plucked the Onmyoji seal from Lucian's palm, its silver runes pulsing under her touch. Boundary technique. The room shivered, then blossomed into a perfect translucent dome of light. Walls, ceiling, even the windows were swallowed by the barrier's glow. Outside, distant voices and footsteps muted to nothing. Guan Yue's voice dropped to a whisper. "Until the moon trial reaches its final verdict, not a word of this will reach your family's elders." Inside the dome, nothing could break their standoff, neither intrusion nor revelation, until the very end. It would be disastrous if anything went wrong and the moon trial failed. Guan Yue decided to begin by erecting an invisible barrier to keep ordinary passersby from noticing their work. Once that was secure, she would capture the Li family's elder and, using onmyoji arts, seal the ancestors' memories for a few days. Japanese onmyoji had always fascinated her. Lucian watched with genuine interest as she prepared her spells. In this world, Britain wielded arcane sorcery, China practiced Taoist magic, Japan commanded onmyoji, and countless other nations had their own mystical systems. Clow-Rito's Clow cards, for example, combined Chinese Taoist principles with Western spellcraft. Japanese onmyoji, though, was essentially a branch of yin-yang and five elements theory from Taoism. Its essence remained the same, so she treated it as an extension of her usual arts. Shikigami, earth shuling, Guan Yu intoned. Instantly, a soft glow traced the outline of her barrier. Satisfied, she withdrew a small paper effigy from her sleeve, lips moving in a silent chant. With a swift flick of her wrist, she tossed it toward Lucian. No sooner had it left her hand than the paper figure shivered to life, its inked features rippling as it transformed into a living spirit, and then it bounded forward, straight at him. Thunder and lightning are coming. Lucian barely lifted his hand when a crackling bolt of lightning erupted forth, shredding the paperman's spirit he had summoned into fluttering tatters. He drew upon the very essence of thunder, unleashing the Li family's legendary thunder method. Even a divine being would have quailed. A simple talisman paper shikigami didn't stand a chance. What? So powerful? Across from him, Guan Yu Gefan's eyes widened in shock. She'd assumed this Li clan elder was of average strength, easily handled, but his swift annihilation of her shikigami and the overwhelming magical aura radiating from him proved otherwise. His power far surpassed that of the current head of the Li family. Born with prodigious moon magic and masterful in every onmyoji art, including the formidable 9-character mantra, she was hailed as Japan's most powerful shrine maiden. The only person who had ever made her feel so thoroughly outmatched was Elio Hiragizawa, the world's strongest mage, when they first met. Absolutely unbeatable, Guan Yu Gefan muttered, cutting off his shikigami and onmyoji spirits. He sealed away his magic and let the barrier collapse. I admit defeat, Elder Li. Just hear me out. I'll do anything you ask. He knew continuing the fight was pointless. As the Li family's senior, Li Xuan had no reason to obstruct the Moon Judgment ritual. Even if he wanted to stop it, he could summon Elio Hiragisawa for backup. And if Li Xuan were hurt or trapped in a protracted battle, he wouldn't be free to aid Sakura in completing the Moon Judgment. I'm not unreasonable, Guanjue Geffen added quickly. Please allow me to explain, Master Li. Lucian watched him lower his defenses. He felt a flicker of disappointment. He'd hoped to study the Japanese refinements to onmyoji magic, especially their 9-character mantra, and perhaps adopt something valuable. Yet here was Guanyu Geffen, surrendering almost before the real contest had begun. Reluctantly, Lucian nodded. Very well. Speak your piece. Guanyu Geffen bowed his head, relief flooding his features. The tense air around them seemed to loosen, and for the moment, the only sound was the faint rustle of fallen leaves on the courtyard stones, an unexpected calm after the storm of magic they'd just unleashed. If I'd known sooner, I could have prepared, Lucian said with a wry smile, tucking his sword back into its sheath. All right, Mr. Li, tell me everything. Guan Yifen's eyes flicked nervously to the drawn blade at his side. Afraid Lucian might strike at any moment, he hurriedly laid out the story of what he'd learned from the future. Every detail, save one. He omitted the fact that Elio Hiragisawa was the reincarnation of Kraurido. I bear no ill will toward you, nor do I wish to steal the Clow cards, he explained. My sole purpose is to help Sakura and Sioran complete the final Moon Judgment, whoever ends up claiming the cards in the end. With that, he produced a small, ornate object wrapped in silken cloth. Unfurling it, he revealed a delicate bronze bell, etched with lunar phases. This is the Moon Bell, he said, a magical artifact crafted by Clow Reed himself. It will play a vital role when the judgment commences. Lucian stepped forward, studying the bell's gentle curves as its faint silvery chime resonated through the room. He met Giffan's gaze, his expression unreadable. I believe you, he admitted at last. But there's one thing I must know. You claim Elio Hiragisawa sent you to assist with this Moon Judgment. Who is he, truly, and what does he hope to accomplish by involving you, or any of us, in this affair? Guanyu Giffan swallowed hard. The question hung in the air, charged with the unspoken power of legends long thought dormant. No one else knows that Ario Hiragi is the reincarnation of Clow Reed, so Lucian's question was perfectly natural. Guan Yuigi Fan hesitated. Without Ario's express permission, she wasn't sure how much she was allowed to reveal. This was far from a minor issue. If word ever got out, the entire magical community would be thrown into turmoil. Lucian gave her a reassuring smile. If it's awkward to explain now, just catch me after the performance. Fill me in then, and I'll feel a lot better. Chapter 429, The World's Strongest Magician, Second Update. All right, I'll call you as soon as I've made contact. Guanyu Geffen paused thoughtfully, then nodded. Encountering this Lee family elder had been a complete surprise. She needed to alert Elio Hiragisawa immediately to decide their next moves. This elder's power must rival Elio's, otherwise Elio would have detected them long ago. Yet Guanyu had never even heard of such a formidable mage in the Lee clan. Since Crowley's death, the family had kept an unusually low profile. Whispers claimed the true powerhouse was the clan matriarch, Li Xiaolong's mother. Evidently, the lineage that contributed over half of Crowley's bloodline was far more extraordinary than anyone had suspected. "Okay, let's go find our seats," she said. "The show's about to start." With his questions answered, Lucian fell silent. Guanyu led him quickly toward the school auditorium. At 9:30 on the dot, the evening performance began. Lucian settled into his seat as the lights in the school auditorium dimmed. A hush fell over the audience, and Tomoyo's clear voice rang out through the speakers. "Welcome to Evergreen Academy's spring play. Our first scene, the great Castle of Rosevale." The heavy curtains parted to reveal two boys in makeshift crowns and glittering robes. The king struck a dramatic pose. "Last night, I told the director I didn't want to be the villain," he declared with mock indignation. "Yet here I am, full of mischief." His queen rolled her eyes, hands planted firmly on her hips. "Kids will be kids," she sighed, but the corners of her mouth twitched in amusement. From the shadows of the stage's far corner, Barry Bell, the wicked witch, slithered into view, cackling beneath her pointed hat. Lucian leaned forward, a grin tugging at his lips. The actors might have been nothing more than fourth graders, but their energy was infectious, and the story of royal intrigue and magic was unexpectedly well told. By the end of the first act, the princess grew so exasperated with her mother's endless advice that she suddenly burst into a tantrum, accusing her of never understanding her feelings. The audience giggled at the over-the-top exchange. After a brief intermission, Act 2 opened with Xiaolong, swathed in a tangle of blonde curls, stepping onto the stage as the pouting princess. His voice was so sharp and grating that Lucian had to stifle a laugh. Clearly, dressing up in a frilly gown hadn't done wonders for his mood. Just as the scene reached its peak, the spotlight swung to the opposite wing, and there stood Sakura, dressed head to toe in Tomoyo's carefully designed prince's costume, complete with a velvet jacket and a jeweled sash. Applause cascaded through the hall. But before the ovation could swell, Momoya, who'd been sitting right in front of Lucian, leaped up, eyes wild with excitement. With all the bravado of a seasoned actor, she strode onto the stage and in one swift motion, delivered a playful slap to her sister's cheek. The audience gasped, then erupted into cheers, convinced it was all part of the show. Lucian shook his head in disbelief and laughed. Sure, it was a children's play, but for a moment, between the crowns, the curses, and that perfectly timed slap, it felt as thrilling as any grand production he'd ever seen. Coming, at the climax of the play, just as Sakura, cast as the prince, leaned in to kiss Sioran, playing the princess, a suffocating darkness swept through the entire theater. In that instant, Lucian felt the passage of time itself stall around him. The dark card truly is one of the two strongest Clow cards, he realized, capable even of freezing time. His magic surged outward in a brilliant pulse, shattering the oppressive gloom. Immediately, the flow of time snapped back into its natural rhythm. Lucian chose not to pursue the dark card further. It had been given to Sakura as a gift, with no malevolent intent, and he trusted her to handle it. Sure enough, Sakura, still ringed by the card's dark aura, calmly produced a hidden light card from within herself. With a graceful gesture, she invoked its power and effortlessly subdued both of the legendary cards housed in her ring. 2 down, 2 to go, Lucian murmured, a mixture of relief and anticipation stirring in his chest. Next week's full moon, the night of the moon's judgment, is fast approaching. It's time to call Elio Hiragisawa, Guanyu Taho murmured to herself. Standing at the edge of the performance arena, she finally exhaled in relief as Sakura flawlessly mastered both the light and dark cards. Rather than lingering to watch the finale, she slipped back to her office and placed a call to Elio in the UK. "Did controlling the light and dark cards go smoothly?" she asked. "Perfectly," Elio replied. but there's been an incident with the Ili family. The Li clan is no small matter, Kuan Yue said, her brow furrowing. I understand. I'll catch the earliest flight tomorrow to deal with it. What's happened? She prompted. Minor complications. Nothing too serious, Elio assured her. I'd planned to wait until after the moon's judgment, but it makes sense to move up the trip. I want to see the results with my own eyes. As Kuan Yu Taho ended the call, Lucian sat on the stage stairs, still engrossed in the performance. A faint smile curved his lips. Let me experience firsthand the power of the world's greatest magician. Lucian had been tracing Kanyue Gefan's mental signature, so he easily overheard her conversation with Elio Hiragisawa. At this point, he knew he stood no chance against Crowley, but Elio was a different matter. Although El Elio carried only a fragment of Crowrito's soul and memories, and thus wasn't truly Crowrito, he was still incredibly formidable. When the performance finally ended, Lucian gathered Little Wolf and Berry Bell and began to head home. Just then, Kanyue Gefan approached him. Lucian, she said quietly, he asked me to tell you he'd like to meet with you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, Lucian repeated. He nodded. That works. After Kanyue departed, Berry Bell tilted her head. Ancestor, she asked, when did you meet Teacher Kanyue? And who's this person you're meeting tomorrow? Lucian smiled and ruffled their hair. I only met her today, and she seems trustworthy. No need to worry. As for tomorrow night, it's someone I haven't met yet. He looked down at the two youngsters with genuine pride. By the way, you both performed brilliantly today. What do you want for dinner tonight? Lucian asked as he hovered over the countertop, casually flipping through the options. Lee Bailing's face lit up the moment she heard the menu. Barbecued pork, pineapple buns, and wonton noodles, she announced, eyes sparkling. Before coming here, she had known little about her ancestor, only that he held the highest rank in their clan and was said to be enlightened. Since arriving, she discovered just how extraordinary he really was. He could make them fly, teleport them across the world, and conjure up sumptuous feasts with a thought. If he desired something, it simply appeared. Perfect, Lucian agreed, a small smile tugging at his lips. Let's have barbecued pork, pineapple buns, and wonton noodles, then. With a soft ripple in the air, Lucian dematerialized and, in the blink of an eye, reassembled back home, this time accompanied by Little Wolf perched on his shoulder and Berry Bell skipping at his side. Night had fallen when Lucian was poring over his magical studies in his room the next evening. A sudden jolt ran through him, and his eyes snapped open. He felt a surge of raw, potent arcana, a summoning spell of no small power. He knew at once who had called him. Elio Hiragisawa, arriving all the way from England and requesting this clandestine meeting. Lucian rose to his feet, determination glinting in his eyes. In an instant, his form blurred, and with a faint pop, he vanished from the chamber. Moments later, he reappeared high above the town's central park, the cool night breeze ruffling his hair. He stared down into the moonlit clearing, ready for whatever awaited him. Ario Hiragisawa? Lucian stared in surprise at the young magician hovering before him, a slender figure with long black hair and round glasses, bearing an uncanny resemblance to Crowley. At first glance, Elio looked no older than Ciaran. Yet Lucian knew better. This boy was actually the same age as Sakura's father, Fujitaka. In this world of sorcery, it was effortless for a master like Elio to reshape his appearance, to look younger, or even to transform into a chair or a table, using advanced metamorphosis spells. I am he, Elio replied, bowing politely. And you must be Mr. Lee. Lucian nodded, still taking in the illusion of youth Elio had so convincingly crafted. Given what he'd seen in the anime, Lucian suspected Elio had deliberately adopted this childlike form to draw closer to Sakura and further his own designs. For a magician of Elio's caliber, altering one's image was mere parlor trickery. Elio straightened, his bright eyes meeting Lucian's with earnest respect. Though he might look like a boy, the sorcerer thought of himself as an independent individual, far removed from Crowley's shadow. And when it came to encountering someone older and more experienced, Elio's sense of propriety simply called for deference. Welcome, Elio continued, gesturing with a graceful sweep of his hand. I've been expecting you. Chapter 430, Duel Between Mages. Lucian drifted forward, settling himself directly opposite Hiragisawa Ario. Spare me the formalities, he said coolly. Cultivators respect only strength, not age. I'll get straight to the point. Why have you summoned me? Ario's eyes narrowed as he began a silent incantation. I cannot answer that just yet, old sir, he replied, his voice smooth and cold. A golden glow pulsed in his palm, coalescing into a radiant sun staff. By the covenant of shadows, I command you, lift your seal and reveal your true power. Lucian's heart tightened. This wasn't merely a challenge. It was a bid to tamper with his very mind. Ario intended not just to duel him in magic, but to erase the memories that tied him to his past life as the legendary mage Curalito. Since inheriting Curalito's memories, Lucian had struggled with a torrent of power and precognitive visions that he couldn't fully control. Each glimpse of the future left him unsettled, desperate to find solid ground. Now Ario sought to sever that connection before Lucian could unlock the secret of his reincarnation. Clenching his fists, Lucian met Ario's gaze with unwavering resolve. You may try to steal my memories, but you'll fail. I'll fight, for my past and for the future I choose. The sun staff flared with blinding light, while shadows writhed at its core. Across the ether-charged arena, the two mages readied themselves. As arcane energies crackled in the air, their duel, one of light and darkness, was about to begin. Lucian stood alone in the twilight, the soft light of the setting sun glinting off his glasses. He wasn't Clowreed reborn, nor did he wish to be. Instead, he had chosen to honor Clow's final request, to help Sakura inherit and fully master the Clo cards. In return, he would use Sakura's power to split half of his own magical energy with the other reincarnation, Fujitaka, freeing himself to live a peaceful, ordinary life as a humble magician. After all, if every moment of our fate is already written and foretold, what joy remains in living? Once his mission was complete, he promised himself he would reveal the entire truth and help the head of the Lee family recover the memories Clowreed had hidden away. A familiar, sardonic voice broke his reverie. So it really is as I thought, the speaker said, stepping into the last slant of daylight. You're every bit the conniving, narrow-eyed fellow in glasses. And of course, you won't tell me why you're doing any of this, just as I expected. Lucian let a small, wry smile play at his lips. You're quite perceptive, he replied, but I have no desire to relive Clowreed's life. Still, if I must see this through, I suppose I'll have to learn a thing or two from you. After all, you are supposed to be the most powerful wizard in the world. As the other man's eyes narrowed, Lucian's mind turned over one final thought. Clowreed was known as a sinister, immoral figure. It seemed unlikely he would have simply confessed his entire plan to a reincarnation. In the old tales, much like in that anime where Ario reshaped Xiaoran and Yue's memories, he would have revealed the truth only to seal or erase the knowledge afterward. Everything about this fit Reed's style. Speak plainly, then make sure no one else ever remembered. And so Lucian prepared himself to play his part in that legacy, knowing exactly when he would choose to set the truth free. Lucian remained calm. He'd spent weeks studying the Clow cards and honing his own abilities. He couldn't promise himself victory against Hiragi Ario, but he was confident in his own survival. Even if Ario did defeat him, she couldn't erase or alter his memories. After all, this Lucian was only one of many clones scattered across the globe, with his original consciousness safely housed in the Marvel Universe. Should any memories be wiped from this particular body, the original would simply restore them. Even the combined soul force of his fellow clones, like the last time, couldn't override such defenses. Sorry, old man, Lucian murmured. Ario offered him a faint, amused smile and raised her staff. Time, pause. At her command, the very fabric of time stilled. Leaves hung motionless in midair, birds froze mid-song, and the gentle breeze ceased its dance through the park. Ario alone remained unaffected, stepping forward on invisible currents. But after barely half a meter, she abruptly halted, brow furrowed. It actually cracked, she muttered, astonished. Lucian grinned. Mr. Ario, your time magic isn't powerful enough to trap me. Beneath his feet, a glowing magical sigil sprang to life. The bonds of frozen time shattered instantly around him, and the park's world snapped back into motion. Lucian still hadn't mastered true time magic. He couldn't freeze the flow of time the way Hiragi Ario could. But after countless nights poring over every scrap of arcane lore he could find, the fairy ball spells of fairy tale, the Ancient One's time law, the Ha series time conversion incantations, even the Forbidden Time card and the Sorrow card, he was finally on the cusp of breaking that last barrier. Shattering Ariel's time pause trick would be child's play. Hungarian Mirror World, Lucian commanded. With a flourish of his hand, a colossal, ornate mirror shimmered into existence behind him. This area is far too busy, he called back to the gathering crowd. If you'd like a true test of magic, Mr. Ariel, step through this mirror with me. Without waiting for a reply, Lucian turned and strode through the silver surface. On the other side, the world rippled around him. Walls of translucent glass closed the space into a perfectly silent chamber, echoes swallowed by the mirror's imposing frame. Inside, Hiragi Ariel, always cool and collected, finally revealed the faintest glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. With Kuralito's memories and that reservoir of potent magic at his disposal, Lucian's power had skyrocketed. He'd already become the youngest magician in history to claim the title of the world's strongest. In the eyes of the Magic Association's so-called top elders, he was a force of nature. And until this moment, he'd assumed that this esteemed Lee family elder would be no more than an equal to those frail old magicians back in the association. Now, alone together in the mirror world, Lucian braced himself for the real challenge to begin. Lucian remembered from Kuralito's memories that he'd mastered every Lie family spell, and yet here he was, caught off guard. But wasn't this very unpredictability what he'd been chasing all along? A thrill of excitement and curiosity bubbled up inside him. Gripping the sunstaff, Ariel Hiragi strode straight through the mirror's surface without a moment's hesitation. This mirrored realm is a reflection of reality, tied to our world by magic, Ariel murmured. It's astonishing. Crossing into that alternate space, Ariel quickly grasped how the enchantment worked. It reminded him of the mirror cards Kurorito once crafted, only those cards merely duplicated people and objects, whereas this spell duplicated an entire environment. Drawing a slow breath, he raised his wand for the next move. Summon lightning! From Lucian's vantage point outside the mirror, he wasted no time. He unleashed the Lie family's thunder spell, and a jagged bolt of electricity screamed toward the intruder. Shield! With a swift flick of his wand, Ariel conjured a translucent barrier that shimmered in the mirror light, absorbing the full force of the lightning. At the very instant the lightning bolt struck his shield, Lucian's expression flickered with genuine surprise. This lightning technique, its power is off the charts. He knew the Lee family's thunder art better than most, having studied it and used it himself, yet he'd never seen it unleashed with such force. This elder clearly had perfected it to a new level. As Lucian thought, as expected of Kuralito's reincarnation, lightning alone won't shatter a true magic barrier. Before him, Hiragi Ariel stood firm, his mystical energy entwined with the thunder itself, reinforcing his shield. Lucian quickly ran the calculations in his mind. A magic shield, however powerful, operates on the same principle as any ward. It must draw on raw arcane law, and once bound to shadow law, it becomes even tougher to crack. Move, Lucian snapped. In a blur, Hiragi Ariel slipped past the hail of thunderbolts, materializing behind Lucian. Seizing the opening, he launched his counterstrike. Shadows! From the darkness around him, countless black tendrils shot forward like living ropes, lashing toward Lucian's form. His shield, though unbroken, now faced a relentless assault, and Lucian realized that pure defense would only last so long. Chapter 431, A Match Made in Heaven. Apparat. Lucian's world shivered as Elio Hiragisawa flashed into existence behind him, launched a volley of shadow magic, and vanished in the same heartbeat. Against a master as versatile as Hiragisawa, there was no room for error. A single moment caught in darkness, and your opponent could end the fight. Drawing a steady breath, Lucian wove a silent spell. His body shimmered and then disappeared from view as he drew every mote of mana tight around him. Shadowless, divine edge. The invisible blade sprang forth, its transparent form slicing through the air toward the spot where Elio had just stood. Elio, came the challenge. The tip of his sun-forged staff tapped the ground. A radiant magic circle bloomed at his feet, unleashing a blinding pulse that not only shattered the oncoming blade, but also bathed Lucian's hidden form in searing light. The forced exposure left Lucian no choice but to raise a protective ward. Ironclad Aegis, barrier. A faint clang resonated as the shimmering shield snapped into place, just in time to block the residual shockwave. Elio Hiragisawa merely curved his lips in a confident smile and dissolved into thin air once more. Lucian watched Elio Hiragisawa vanish into thin air and fought down a sigh. He'd spent years mastering every branch of magic: fire, water, light, shadow, you name it, he could wield it. In all his previous battles, that sheer versatility had carried him to victory. But today's opponent was no ordinary foe. Elio, who bore Crorito's memories, was just as skilled, just as adaptable. Catching him off guard was nearly impossible. Lucian muttered the tracking incantation, Revelare Vestigia. A faint trail of glowing footprints sprang into existence, leading directly to Elio's hidden position. Cornered, Elio reappeared with a flourish of his cloak. Illusio! The world exploded into chaos. Dozens of Elios materialized around Lucian, each one weaving deadly spells in his direction. He staggered under the onslaught of phantom fire and crackling energy, uncertain where to raise his defenses. But barely a heartbeat later, his mental fortress shattered the phantoms like glass. The illusions dissolved in a spray of motes. Lucian allowed himself a small, wry smile. That was impressive, but it won't be enough. He gripped his staff more firmly and prepared his counterstrike. You're the most powerful mage I've ever faced. Elio Hiragisawa felt a begrudging respect as Lucian casually shattered his illusion. In his 41 years, he'd never encountered a sorcerer so formidable, one who could go toe-to-toe with him. Compared to the level 10 mages he normally dispatched, Lucian's power felt closer to 1,000. This ends now, Elio muttered. He traced elaborate runes in the air, summoning a blazing circle of sunlight and shadow beneath Lucian's feet. O hidden darkness, drown my enemy. In an instant, inky tendrils of black magic erupted from Elio's form, swallowing the mirror world in utter darkness as they lunged toward Lucian. Elio's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. This dark power far exceeded the feeble shadow card he'd once wielded. But Lucian only exhaled, calm as ever. Invisible wards flared to life around him, halting the void's advance. A low hum filled the air as he drew on every strand of his arcane mastery: elemental force, raw willpower, and masterful control of magic, condensing them into a brilliant sphere of light. The two titanic energies collided in a shockwave that cracked the mirrored walls, each striving to shatter the other's defenses. Lucian's eyes burned with determined intensity as he lifted a hand. Elemental powers, converge at my command. Bright arcs of energy leapt from his fingertips, poised to meet the darkness head-on. Lucian took a steady breath and called out, O river of light, guided by the fairies, shine forth and banish these wicked fangs, fairy glory. At once, a vast circle of luminescence blossomed above his head. Countless motes of starlight coalesced into towering pillars of pure radiance, driving back the surrounding gloom in a single breathtaking surge. This was the moment where light and darkness clashed in all their fury. Across from him, Crorito's pale eyes narrowed. In truth, Crorito himself wielded both light and dark magic. After all, he was the one who forged the light cards, but since his reincarnation as Elio Hiragisawa, his affinities had shifted firmly toward the shadows. Even his famed artifacts, the spinal sun and the ruby moon, emblems of solar and lunar power, were now laced with darkness. Of course, at this level of mastery, light or dark were merely technical descriptors, not moral judgments. Impressive, Crorito murmured, watching Lucian's spell. His own appraisal of the young mage soared from a modest level 100 all the way to 300. It seems this is truly your limit. With a graceful motion, Crorito raised his sun's staff. Dark energy crackled along its length before erupting outward, a ripple of malevolent power that slammed into Lucian's pillars of light. Sparks flew as shadow and radiance met, each force striving to overwhelm the other. Lucian braced himself, determined that no darkness, no matter how potent, would extinguish his beacon of hope. Elio Hiragisawa's dark magic was clearly superior. Lucian felt the shadowy force pressing down on the fairy glory, step by step. He didn't panic. In this life, he carried Crorito's memories and a fragment of his power. Still, in his fragile human form, he stood no chance against such overwhelming dark energy. I thought it wouldn't be this easy, Lucian murmured. He raised both arms to the sky and intoned the ancient words, Animagus transformation. In an instant, his body swelled and reshaped itself. Golden scales rippled across his limbs as bones reformed, claws sprouted, and twin horns unfurled atop his skull. Lucian had become a dragon. Magic roared through him like a storm. The fairy glory, already straining against Elio's darkness, flared brighter at the surge of arcane energy. Shadows recoiled with flickering hiss. Maintaining that brilliant aura for defense, Lucian lowered his massive head and bared rows of gleaming teeth. He exhaled, and from his throat poured a torrent of three-colored flame, tongues of crimson, azure, and violet that crackled with pure, destructive fire. Across the battlefield, Elio Hiragisawa's dark eyes widened in shock. The youth he had been mocking had just transformed into a dragon. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. Then the three-color inferno roared toward him. Elio's lips curved into a smirk, but the confidence in his eyes wavered. The battle had just taken a turn he hadn't anticipated. Lucian had never encountered magic like this. He'd studied every form of transformation spell in the grimoire, but none allowed the caster to reshape himself into a new kind of magical creature, let alone one that could rival the power of an elder in the Li family. Kuralito had once summoned Xiaoke and Yu. Lucian himself could call forth Sibi and Ruby. Yet this rival seemed to excel at both disciplines. He transformed into something neither Western dragon nor Eastern worm, and he conjured a devastating, three-colored flame that pulsed with raw, overwhelming might. Normally, an elder of the Li clan would assume the traditional form of an Eastern dragon, sleek, serpentine, covered in golden scales, and Lucian knew that shape well. But this creature's form was utterly unlike anything he'd ever read about. Its wings were broad and leathery like a Western drake's, its body sinuous like an Eastern dragon's, and multi-hued scales rippled across its length, shining with every color of the spectrum. That alone would have been astounding, but the surge of power was what truly set Lucian's teeth on edge. He felt the raw pressure of magic so intense that it matched, if not exceeded, his own. He tightened his grip on his staff. If this adversary's power really stood on equal footing with his, then Lucian couldn't underestimate him, not for a second. "Ruby! Sibi!" he called. Instantly, two glowing circles, one silver, one gold, ignited in the air before him. From the golden sigil stepped Sibi, radiant as the midday sun. From the silver, Ruby, calm and cool as moonlight. No sooner had they materialized than the three-colored flames swept toward the two summons like a maddened hurricane. Sibi thrust out her slender arms, channeling the pure brilliance of daylight into a barrier that roared with golden fire. The inferno met her shield with a crackling thunder, and brilliant sparks rained down around them. At the same time, Ruby raised her pale hands, weaving lunar energy into a shimmering dome of silvery mist. The flames struck it with a hiss, but the dome held firm. Together, the twin powers of sun and moon stood their ground against the impossible blaze, buying Lucian precious seconds to plan his next move. The air crackled with magic. The battlefield had become a crucible, and only the strongest will survive. Move. With a flash of dark energy, Ario Hiragi's assault crashed against Lucian's shield. He held firm, and as her magic shattered on his barrier, she abruptly halted her attack. Drawing in a deep breath, Ario retracted her shadows and, flanked by her two magical attendants, activated her teleportation rune. In an instant, they vanished from the mirror realm and reappeared in the real world. Lucian watched them go, a triumphant smile curving his lips. Shifting from his draconic form back into human shape, he stepped out of the fractured mirror landscape and onto solid ground. He knew Ario had realized the truth. She could not overcome him here without suffering serious harm. Better to retreat and live to fight another day. The air settled, and the rippling portal dissolved behind him. Lucian's heart thrummed with satisfaction. For now, at least, the battle was won, and the mirror realm remained his domain. Chapter 432. Judgment of the Moon. Lucian blinked as the fractured landscape of their duel dissolved, and he found himself once more hovering above the town park. Below him, Hirasawa Elio calmly sheathed his sun scepter, a knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Enough," Elio called, eyes narrowed. "Stop fighting. You carry the Li family name, and I can see your strength. It's time you learned the truth." Lucian's limbs trembled. He'd poured every ounce of power into their clash. He could probably overwhelm Elio with another surge of energy, but at what cost? Their battle had distracted him from his true purpose. honoring Clow Reed's final wish while pursuing his own destiny. He had concealed the whole story from the Lee family elder, afraid that revelation would spark a fierce struggle over the Clow cards. Now, faced with an opponent whose power matched his own, greed would only lead to mutual ruin. It was far better to be honest and negotiate. He forced himself to nod. "I'm listening," he said. Elio remained perfectly composed, as if Lucian's consent were the only move left on the board. In that silent moment, it was clear the next confrontation would be one of words and hidden motives, far more dangerous than any spell. After summoning 2 magical familiars, Lucian noted that the gap between their powers wasn't as wide as he'd feared. His true goal, after all, wasn't to defeat Ario Hiragi, but simply to make contact and to learn from him. Ario raised his staff, the golden sun emblem gleaming, and spoke without a trace of hesitation. "The story begins with Clow Reed," Ario announced. "I am the reincarnation of a fragment of his soul." He laid out everything, his plan, his motives, every hidden detail. Lucian listened, then let out a soft, rueful sigh. "No wonder your staff looks so familiar," he said, tracing a finger along the carved shaft. "It matches Clow Reed's sun staff in our Lee family archives, and it can channel all the magic of the Clow cards. It's a pity that our Li Xiaolang was never meant to inherit them." Ario's smile only deepened. Lucian pressed on. "Even though Sakura is Clow Reed's chosen heir, what you've shown me suggests that in the end, the Lee family will be the real winners, doesn't it?" Ario inclined his head in quiet agreement. Lucian chuckled, brushing back a lock of dark hair. "You make a convincing case. Very well, I won't stand in your way. Even though Sakura is destined to inherit the Clow cards, she will one day marry Sioran and remain a member of the Lee family. In that sense, the Lee clan gains far more than a mere deck of magical cards. They secure the perfect heir to wield them. As head of the Lee family, Li Xuan has every reason to support Sakura's succession. But I have one condition," Lucian said, his calm smile vanishing as he turned to Ario Hiragi. Everything he'd said so far had been set up. Now he spoke his true purpose. "You know that I practice our family's Taoist traditions while also studying Western sorcery, learning from Clow Reed to fuse Eastern and Western methods. Lately, I've been delving into the magical principles underlying the Clow cards themselves. Since you carry Clow Reed's memories, will you teach me?" Ario Hiragi met his gaze steadily. "I couldn't call myself your teacher," she replied, "but I'd be happy to exchange magical insights with you." She nodded, her agreement firm and immediate. Ario wasn't the kind of person driven to push magic to its breaking point or determined to become the world's greatest sorcerer. If he'd ever cared about that, he never would have asked Sakura to lend him half of her magical power. He didn't mind at all if Lucian emerged stronger after their exchange. This agreement cost him nothing. "All right," Ario said. "Let's swap our powers." With the deal struck, Lucian wasted no time. He asked Ario for his town address, then vanished in a flash of teleportation. "I never expected to meet a sorcerer in this world who could stand up to you," he called over his shoulder. Behind them, Ruby Yu fluttered her butterfly wing, Jeez her slender form almost fairy-like, and watched Lucian's disappearing figure with wide-eyed awe. Beside her, Spineru's son, whose wings bore the glossy sheen of a black panther's pelt, replied in a steady voice, "Ario is only the reincarnation of half of Clow Reed's soul, not Clow Reed himself." Ruby stuck out her tongue. "So what? He's still the mightiest magician alive." Ario smiled gently. "I am me, not Clow Reed, and I have no desire to be the strongest mage in the world. All I want is to live life on my own terms." Chapter Text: The Burden of Power. "It's a relief that Mr. Lee has finally claimed the title of the world's strongest magician," Lucian murmured, settling back on the soft white cloud beside Hiraizawa Ario. "Now I can breathe a little easier." Holding the highest rank among magicians is more than just an honor. It's a magnet for trouble. Challenges come at you from every direction. Brash rivals eager to prove themselves, schemers plotting to harness your power, and anyone else who needs a quick fix to their problems. And Lucian, by nature calm and private, would rather avoid all the commotion. A week had passed since Li Xiaolang's triumph. Now, under the moonlit sky, Tokyo Tower glowed like a beacon against the dark horizon. Far below, the moon judgment ceremony was unfolding. Sakura and Xiaoran Li were capturing the final 2 Clow cards. From their vantage point, Lucian and Ario watched the elegant battleground of magic. "We've lost," Lucian said quietly, observing the graceful but unstoppable forms of Kero and Yue. Even without Clowreed's direct intervention, the two guardians were simply too powerful for Xiaoran to handle. The young boy's Taoist training within the Li family was formidable among his peers, but he had no answer for the combined might of Clow's protectors. Ario nodded, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "Xiaoran fought bravely," she said, "but Yue's speed and Kero's cunning left him no opening." Lucian frowned, thinking back to the swift, decisive strike that ended the duel. "He's talented," he conceded, "but today wasn't his day." Below them, Sakura summoned a final burst of cherry blossom magic, sealing the last card with a radiant glow. A cheer rose from the crowd gathered around Tokyo Tower. Lucian allowed himself a small smile. The ritual was over, and the cards were safe once more. Ario turned to him, curiosity shining in her violet eyes. "You've been helping me understand your world of magic all week," she said. "What happens next for you, Lucian?" He glanced down at the softly drifting clouds, then back at her. "I'll keep out of the limelight as much as I can," he replied. "But if the world's strongest magician has a duty, I suppose I'll answer the call when it comes." As the last echoes of applause faded into the night, Lucian and Ario rose to their feet on the cloud, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. Lucian's power was undeniable. Against virtually any ordinary mage in the world, he would prevail 80% of the time without breaking a sweat. Yet here he stood before you, the judge and guardian created by Clowreed himself. Even though Clowreed's death had drained much of Yu's strength, what remained was still far beyond the reach of a typical sorcerer. Lucian learned in an instant just how vast the gulf is between an ordinary mage and the one true master of Clow magic. Yue watched him coolly and murmured, "True to her father's bloodline, she can turn a single drop of magic into an ocean." That she was Sakura, Lucian's next challenger. When Yue had first tested Xiaoran Li, he had been stern and unrelenting. But facing Sakura, he showed mercy, not because he intended to lose, but because his real purpose was not to crush her with power. It was to grant her his recognition. As Clowreed's chosen arbiter, Yue alone could decide who might inherit the Clow cards. No one, no matter how talented, could claim them without his approval. That explained why he had struck Lucian down so decisively. The first trial existed to prove a contender's strength and resolve. Once Lucian fell, Yue's true task came into focus, to guide Sakura forward. With the bell that symbolized Clowreed's authority in hand, he prepared to lead her into the second trial, one she would face not simply to test her might, but to earn Yu's blessing, and with it, the right to command the Clow cards. Chapter 7. The Second Trial. Lucian watched the remnants of the first trial's spectacle fade into silence and was certain of one thing. Sakura's failure had been nothing more than a calculated ruse. Before passing beyond this world, Kuro Rito must have arranged everything to push her, forcing her to tap into reserves of strength she didn't even know she had. It was exactly the kind of provocation their late mentor would have devised. As the signal for the second trial echoed through the chamber, Lucian's expectations were quickly met. Sakura raised the bird-headed staff she'd struggled with moments ago. The carved crimson eyes along its shaft flickered. Then, almost of their own accord, the head peeled back like the petals of a flower, reshaping itself into a slender, luminescent, star-tipped rod. A soft hume of magic rippled through the air. Across from her, Yue stood motionless, her emerald hair drifting in the gentle breeze that snaked through the hall. Though the rules of the trial demanded resistance, Yue made no attempt to block Sakura's next move. Instead, she closed her eyes and tilted her chin upward, as if inviting whatever spell was about to come. Sakura's eyes glowed with newfound confidence. With a graceful flick of the star staff, she summoned a swirling wind card. The card spun in a vortex of silver light before shooting forward like an arrow. Lucian tensed. He'd never seen anyone control wind so precisely, but Yue offered no defensive gesture. The whirlwind enveloped her, lifting her hair and robes like leaves in a gale, yet the princess did not cry out. When the wind died away, Yue stood perfectly still, one hand brushing a single strand of hair from her face. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, then a soft chime rang out. The trial had been passed. Lucian let out the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Sakura's stare met his, wide with equal parts triumph and disbelief. It wasn't just victory she felt in that moment. It was the promise of a power long buried, finally awakened. And who knew what challenges lay ahead now that her true strength had been unleashed? Kuro Rito's final test had been more than a trial of skill. It had been a reckoning of spirit, and Sakura, it seemed, had just claimed her place among the legends. Chapter 433, A Strange New World, Second Update. The trial of the moon was over at last, and summer vacation had begun. Barry Ling had faced her true feelings before the trial's climax and returned home early to Xiangjiang, while Xiaolong went back to continue his studies. That left Lucian in town, immersed in his magical research. He spent his days borrowing Sakura's Cloud cards and trading techniques with Elio Hiragisawa, the strongest magician and heir to Clow Rider's legacy. Under Elio's mentorship, Lucian's magic had grown by leaps and bounds, especially his command of time magic. He was more confident than ever that it wouldn't be long before he mastered the fairy ball, shattered the seal on Tenru Island, and freed Natsu and the others trapped there. Then, in the midst of summer's heat, another clone appeared. Lucian barely batted an eye. He'd encountered clones before and knew the drill. What did catch him off guard was the world stored in this clone's memories. He examined the flash images, ancient laboratories, alchemical circles, and a pair of piercing red eyes. Names scrolled past his vision. Flame College, Isaac Tubb, Victor. None of them rang any bells. Lucian frowned. He'd heard of fairy tales' legendary guilds and Academy City's scientific marvels, but these terms were entirely foreign. Alchemy, homunculi, flamal, he murmured, replaying fragments of conversations and battle scenes in his mind. Each snippet hinted at a world defined by strange laws of science and magic, where mysterious figures chased immortality and monstrous beings called homunculi walked the earth. Despite his initial surprise, Lucian felt his pulse quicken with excitement. A new world meant new magic to learn, new mysteries to unravel, and new allies, or enemies, to meet. He closed the clone's memory file and leaned back, a determined smile curving his lips. Summer's long days beckoned, and Lucian was ready. Whatever this strange new world held, he intended to dive in headfirst and come out stronger than ever. Lucian had always been fascinated by fictional worlds, movies, novels, anime, comics, even the fairy tales and myths of ages past. But there was no way he could know them all, especially since after long days at work, he barely had the energy to keep up with the latest releases. Yet this new realm, the one his current avatar now inhabited, felt both eerily familiar and completely foreign at the same time. When he told himself he didn't recognize it, something about it rang a bell. When he convinced himself he must know it, countless details didn't match any version he'd ever encountered. The contradiction gnawed at him. To make sense of everything, he first had to understand the life he'd been dropped into. His shell, or clone as he sometimes thought of it, was named Jin Bao Bao, a 17-year-old Chinese boy whose parents had divorced when he was just 7. He had an older sister, Jin Yuan Yuan, and together their names, Yuan Bao, meant treasure, a pointed tribute to their father's single-minded pursuit of wealth. A prominent businessman, he prized profit above all else. Their parents' split had been surprisingly cordial, no public scandal, no bitter custody battles. The truth was simpler and colder. Their marriage had never been about love, only family interests. Once each partner had secured enough social standing and financial clout, they quietly went their separate ways, each becoming something of a fixture in high society circles. And so 10 years later, Bao Bao, now Lucian, found himself piecing together a past that had never been his own, trying to reconcile a history he'd only just begun to live. Lucian's parents had long ago decided there was no reason to stay married for anyone's sake. When the divorce went through, he went to live with his father. His younger sister stayed with their mother. His father ran a cross-border trading company, which was why Lucian had spent most of his life in London. It was an unremarkable enough upbringing, so unremarkable, in fact, that nothing in his day-to-day existence prepared him for what came next. On his 11th birthday, an owl arrived at the door, bearing an envelope sealed with emerald green wax. Lucian tore it open to find an acceptance letter to the legendary Flamal Academy. And that's when things took a turn for the surreal. Flamel wasn't just another boarding school. It was, by all accounts, a genuine institution for the study of magic. Lucian stared at the flowing script, feeling a chill run down his spine. The name, Flamel Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry, sounded eerily familiar. Indeed, it was almost identical to the story he'd encountered in his old clone world memories, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the mythical school of his beloved novels and films. Only this wasn't fiction. At first, Lucian had assumed someone at the academy enjoyed a good joke. Perhaps an author or filmmaker in the magical community had winkingly borrowed from the Muggle world's Harry Potter franchise. But the letter made it clear this was no parody. They knew his name, his age, even his address. They expected him to appear at King's Cross Station's secret Platform 9 tour on September 1st. Magic, it seemed, was real, and it had just found him. It looks like you've provided the world-building notes and setting differences, but I don't yet have the actual chapter text to rewrite. Could you please paste the full machine-translated chapter you'd like me to revise into coherent, idiomatic English with Lucian as the male protagonist? Once I have that, I'll polish it up for your English-speaking audience. Forget everything else. Let's handle the immediate threat first, then we can explore at our leisure. Lucian sifted through the memories coursing through his new clone's mind before finally opening his eyes. This world felt alien, but the presence of true magic assured him of its significance. Who knew what secrets it might hold? Besides, his current vessel was that of a 17-year-old still in school, blissfully unaware of life's darker corners. "Harry, pardon me, I nearly forgot you were here, standing over my father's bones," he said, voice steady. "I meant to introduce you properly, though it seems your fame now rivals mine, the girl who lived. Remarkable, given how much of your legend is spun from half-truths. Allow me to set the record straight on what really happened that night, 13 years ago." In the crumbling tomb, the noseless Dark Lord surveyed his captive, a small witch with round spectacles and the unmistakable lightning bolt scar on her forehead. Behind him, masked Death Eaters trembled in uneasy silence. Lucian stepped forward, brushing dust from his robes. "Excuse my intrusion," he called out, "but if I announced I was leaving this instant, would any of you dare stop me?" He rose fully to his feet, halting Voldemort's dark incantation, its echoes crossing worlds before they could take hold. Lightning crackled across the ruined cemetery, fog slithering around broken tombstones. At its center, Voldemort hovered like a living shadow, crimson eyes blazing down at his trembling servant. "We speak of Lucian, the new clone," he hissed. "Champion of Flamel College, chosen by the Goblet of Fire, our world's Cedric Diggory. The moment he was marked by the goblet, he should have been whisked here and slain by Pettigrew's hand. Yet our magics have shifted. Names and fates have been rewritten. Even our survivors are unrecognizable. Harry Evans, no longer Potter but a girl, escaped that catastrophe, becoming the school's darling and Dean Victor's favorite pupil. But all of that is irrelevant now. Our priority is this imposter calling himself Jerry Mario, this mockery of me." A hiss of anger rippled through Voldemort's voice. "He is not dead? Then finish him, you worthless wretch." Pettigrew's face blanched. He had hesitated just as he cast that fatal curse, allowed Lucian a heartbeat's grace. "Yes, master," he stammered, dread pooling in his bones as he braced for the Dark Lord's wrath. Lucian stared in disbelief. He had poured every ounce of magic into the killing curse, Avada Kedavra, Ra, and watched the student collapse to the floor, motionless. Yet here the boy was again, chest rising and falling as if death had merely been a momentary pause. How could this be? There would be time to puzzle out the mystery later. Voldemort's eyes, pale as winter ice, swept over him. The Dark Lord's anger simmered just beneath the surface of that cold, unreadable mask. Lucian swallowed hard, fighting the urge to look away. He knew better than to hesitate in front of his master. With a steadying breath, Lucian raised his wand. Every muscle tensed as he prepared to unleash another killing curse. "Avada," he began, voice low and precise, ready to end the boy's strange reprieve once and for all. Chapter 434. I'll return. Expelliarmus. Before Pettigrew could finish his incantation for the killing curse, Lucian had already struck. With a flick of his hand, no wand required, the disarming charm hit its mark. Pettigrew's wand flew from his grasp as Lucian followed up instinctively. "Stupefy." The stunning spell exploded in a burst of light, sending Pettigrew crashing to the floor in a lifeless heap. In the familiar Harry Potter universe, those two spells, Expelliarmus and Stupefy, were about as aggressive as Lucian ever allowed himself to appear. Behind the scenes, however, his magic ran much deeper. In another life, another world, he'd wielded a lethal chain of energy curses more fearsome than any killing curse. But here, in this strange new reality, he had no idea who or what might be watching. He knew the legends back home: Dumbledore, Grindelwald, Voldemort, powerful beyond imagination, yet all of them had limits. If his strength equaled theirs, he wasn't worried. But this world was uncharted territory. There might be beings here who could destroy him with a gesture, so he dared not reveal the full extent of his abilities just yet. Better to stay under the radar until he understood the rules of engagement. For now, Pettigrew lay incapacitated, and Lucian's secret remained intact. He would gather information, learn the boundaries of this world, and someday, when he returned, he would do so on his own terms. Let's pick up where we left off. After Voldemort finished barking orders at Pettigrew, he wheeled back to face Harry, intent on resuming the speech he'd been interrupted mid-sentence. No sooner had he spoken a handful of words than the battle he'd anticipated went spectacularly awry. "Here," Lucian murmured. In a flash of crackling energy, his wand, the one he'd carried through countless skirmishes, materialized in his hand. In that same instant, he blurred forward like a bolt of lightning, scooping the unconscious Pettigrew up and extending behind the Dark Lord's back. Before Voldemort could raise a finger, Lucian channeled a staggering 2 billion volts of pure electrical force through his outstretched fingertips, driving it straight into the center of Voldemort's spine. For all his dark brilliance, his mastery of every forbidden spell, his uncanny soul magic, even his uncanny talent for returning from death, Voldemort was utterly unprepared. The concentrated shockwave tore through his magical defenses, sending his eyes rolling and his body convulsing with pain. Every ounce of his power had been fixated on Harry. Never had he suspected an attack so swift, so merciless, from behind. When the sizzling storm of energy finally subsided, the Dark Lord collapsed to one knee, robe smoking and fingers still trembling from residual current. For the first time in his fearsome career, Voldemort knelt broken, an unthinkable triumph born of Lucian's ruthless precision and lightning speed. Lucian's voice rang out above the clash of magic. "The curse stops, now!" With a swift, precise flick of his wand, he shattered the binding spell that held Harry captive. As the last tendrils of dark magic snapped free, Lucian thrust his wand forward and called upon the Goblet of Fire, reshaping it into a crackling portkey. Blue sparks danced around him, Harry, and the nearby Death Eaters, Voldemort, Harley, and Pettigrew, before roaring to life. In an instant, the four of them vanished from the courtyard, reappearing in the cold stillness of a moonlit cemetery. Ancient tombstones rose like silent sentinels, their inscriptions half erased by time. Lucian steadied his breathing, eyes darting for any sign of pursuit. Behind him, Harley muttered something incoherent, while Pettigrew skulked at the edge of the clearing, drawn by equal parts fear and curiosity. Not far away, hidden among the gravestones, a group of masked figures watched in stunned silence. These were the remnants of Voldemort's loyalists, Death Eaters who had slipped through the Ministry's dragnet after the war and insinuated themselves into high-ranking positions. Their official robes and polished wands concealed identities the wizarding world believed lost or imprisoned. They glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering behind their masks. They owed Voldemort their status, their secrets, even their livelihoods, but not their hearts. True believers had died on the battlefield or rotted in Azkaban. These men served only out of fear and ambition. Had they been genuine fanatics, they would have hunted down the scattered remnants of his soul years ago, long before Lucian's sudden intervention. Yet now Voldemort stood resurrected before them. Even as they trembled at the sight, none dared to remove a mask or speak his name. The risk of exposure, of being unmasked in every sense, was too great. Lucian, wand at the ready, stared down the line of silent watchers. Behind him the Dark Lord hissed, anger and shock warping his pale features. But in that frozen moment, power had shifted. The Death Eaters' eyes flicked away, their loyalties unsettled, their fate uncertain. The war had begun again, and the battle for the wizarding world's future would be fought in shadows and in the open, by heroes and by cowards alike. What had just happened left me reeling. My momentary hesitation meant I was a beat too late. I'd failed to stop Voldemort and Harry from vanishing in the portkeys swirl. Embarrassment flushed through me. Stay and face the fallout? Or slip away before anyone noticed? I thought it through. Voldemort had been sent back to the Triwizard Tournament by that portkey, straight into Tubbo's siege and the mass of wizards gathered there. From how easily the student had overpowered him, it was clear Voldemort's strength hadn't fully returned after his resurrection. He'd be defeated for certain. If we hung around, we'd be waiting for Dumbledore to finish the job and bring Voldemort back by portkey, trapping us with no route of escape. The choice was obvious. Without another word, Harley and I apparated away. "Back so soon? Where did they go?" someone shouted. In the next heartbeat, Harley and I reappeared in the stands of the tournament arena. The professors, students, ministry officials, and families, everyone gathered to watch the competition, rose to their feet and burst into cheers. The instant they recognized that noseless figure beneath the faint glow of the extra-dwarf star, the assembled wizards froze. "Headmaster Tabor, he's Voldemort!" Lucian shouted, voice cracking. "He's back! Resurrected!" With a roar, Lucian unleashed a fierce stream of crackling green energy. Voldemort staggered under the assault, and Lucian seized the moment to drag Harry out of the Dark Lord's reach. Panting, he turned and bellowed toward the grandstand where Professors Tabor, Victor, and the other deans were gathered. At the name Voldemort, murmurs of terror rippled through the crowd. Many ethers pulled back, faces pale with dread, but not Headmaster Tabor. In a lightning-quick motion, he drew his wand and hurled a volley of spells at the reborn Dark Lord. Behind him, Professors Victor and Graves sprang into action. Immediately, the Aurors and Ministry officials maintaining order joined the counterattack. Voldemort's lips curled into a sneer as his body reformed, siphoning off the residual electricity. Yet he had no time to mount a true defense. Dozens of wands pointed at him in unison, unleashing relentless volleys of stunning charms and binding hexes. Under the combined might of Tabor's leadership and the Auror's precision, the Dark Lord's newly minted body fragmented in a cascade of inky shards. Black smoke spiraled upward, slipping free of its shattered vessel, and then was gone. For a moment, the courtyard was deathly still. Then the gathered wizards, shaken but victorious, lowered their wands. Lucian stood beside Harry, chest heaving, as the realization swept over them all. Voldemort had returned and had been defeated, at least for now. "Ah, you'll be back for me next time." A furious roar shook the entire arena, sending shivers through every wizard in attendance. "Debao, are you all Did you get hurt?" From the stands, a stout, middle-aged man in his 40s pushed his way down to the field. He helped Lucian to his feet with trembling hands and concern etched across his face. This was Jin Guoqing, father to the boy whose body Lucian now inhabited. Lucian's heart clenched at the sight. This was his first encounter with the clone's living family. He felt awkward, but forced himself to slip into the role. He adopted the gentle, anxious tone he'd heard countless times from Jin Yuanyuan, the boy's mother, and managed a shaky smile. "Father, please don't worry. I'm perfectly fine." It made sense to address him as father. Lucian was wearing this body, after all. Until he'd unraveled the mysteries of this world, playing the part of Jin Guoqing's son felt safest. Behind him, the lingering echo of battle faded as the torn remnants of the arena's magic settled. Lucian glanced over his shoulder, just in time to see a pale, shadow-like figure slipping away. A soul, unmistakably Voldemort's, vanishing into the darkness. He didn't pursue. To Lucian, this Voldemort was no more than a fleeting nuisance. With a final nod to Jin Guoqing, he turned back to face whatever came next, confident that no immediate threat remained. Lucian crouched behind the shattered marble column, chest heaving. He knew that once he'd slipped away this time, Peter Pettigrew would vanish into the Forbidden Forest and lie low for years, waiting until he'd mapped every inch of this world before striking again. And when that day came, Lucian vowed he'd be ready. In the end, the outcome was mercifully swift. Voldemort lay dead at their feet, his snake-black wand shattered. Pettigrew was seized before he could even draw breath. Lucian and Harry, bloodied but unbowed, escorted their captive straight back to Hogwarts, intent on bringing word of these events to Headmaster Tubb and the Minister of Magic of this world. Nothing about their return was dramatic, just efficient. At the last moment, Voldemort had unleashed a killing curse at Lucian. It rebounded, leaving Lucian unconscious but alive. He came to in time to fling himself between a dying Harry and Peter Pettigrew's last panicked curse, pushing Harry out of harm's way. Fearing that the scattered Death Eaters might seize Voldemort's remains to resurrect him and plunge the wizarding world into another war, Lucian and Harry carried the Dark Lord's body in solemn silence. They delivered it, along with Pettigrew and Irons, to Headmaster Tubb and the Minister of Magic. The authorities now possessed irrefutable proof. Voldemort was no more, his servant was in custody, and a new chapter, one of justice and rebuilding, could at last begin. Chapter 435, Unfamiliar Faces in the Journey Home, Second Update. Lucian, you did spectacularly. Brave, clever, and a true Gryffindor. Once Lucian laid out exactly what had happened in the graveyard, every wizard present heaped praise on him. Had he not acted so bravely, and with such quick thinking and skilled magic, Harry would likely have been killed, and Voldemort's return might have gone unnoticed. As for why Voldemort offered no resistance when Lucian confronted him, everyone agreed that the Dark Lord's body, freshly reconstituted through foul black magic, hadn't yet regained its full power. When Lucian and Harry shared the details, the Aurors used the Goblet of Fire to apparate to the cemetery at once. They arrived too late to catch any of the Death Eaters Voldemort had summoned. They'd fled the moment Voldemort fell. All that remained was the bubbling cauldron of potion used in the resurrection ritual. In the aftermath, Voldemort lay dead again. Pettigrew was captured alive, and Sirius Black was publicly declared innocent. News of these events rippled through the British wizarding community over the following days, creating a sensation. Lucian, though, paid little heed to all the hullabaloo. He had accomplished what mattered most. He'd protected his friend and ensured the truth of Voldemort's return could not be denied. Now, with the crisis averted, he looked forward to returning home and to whatever strange encounters awaited him next. Lucian had spent the past week holed up in the Flamel Academy library, surrounded not by spellbooks, but by magical history tomes. He already knew that the Academy's spell repertoire was nearly identical to that of Hogwarts. Different names, similar effects, so there was no point in relearning what he'd mastered long ago. What he really needed were clues about this world's past, how magic had evolved, what dangers lurked beneath modern marvels, and how he might find a way home. He flipped through the volumes on his desk one more time. Modern Magic History, a 21st Century Wizard's Travel Guide, Modern High Technology and the Threat to Wizards. Their glossy pages brimmed with dates, treaties, and accounts of magical breakthroughs, but so far, nothing to explain the portal that had yanked him here. He closed the last book with a soft thump and leaned back in his chair. "Of course," he murmured, glancing around the silent stacks. "It's not the same world at all." In the Harry Potter universe he knew, Wizarding Britain answered to the Ministry of Magic in London. Hogwarts was the only school of its kind, and magical society kept a low profile. Here, however, every nation, Britain included, boasted its own ministry. There were no other schools like Hogwarts or Durmstrang. Flamel Academy seemed unique. Nor were supernatural powers limited to wizards alone in every corner of the globe. European countries still embraced magic, but elsewhere the systems diverged wildly. In Asia, magic intertwined with ancient martial traditions. In Africa, elemental spirits ruled the rituals. In the Americas, shamans tapped into the very soul of the land. Wizards might be the predominant supernatural force in Europe, but beyond its borders, the rules changed entirely. Lucian sighed, rubbing his temples. He'd come here expecting a reasonable facsimile of home, maybe an alternate Britain, a different Hogwarts branch, but the reality was far more complex. To navigate this world, he'd need to understand its unique structure, its global power dynamics, and above all, the connection, if any, between their magical history and the portal that had brought him across dimensions. He reopened Modern Magic History and began skimming once more, determined to uncover the answers hidden in these dusty chronicles. The journey ahead would be anything but ordinary, and he was ready. Lucian flipped through the worn pages of the grimoire, piecing together the fragments of its classified dossier. In America, most of the extraordinary individuals fell into two broad categories, superhumans and experimental mutants. A handful defied easy classification, evolving into truly unique new types. Asia, by contrast, was far more intricate. Japan still harbored its legendary ninjas, while China counted among its elite the enigmatic masters of qi cultivation. The entries offered only broad strokes, but one point was clear. Whether magician, superpowered being, bioengineered subject, or qi-refining adept, they were all collectively labeled aliens. Beyond that, the question of higher-tier entities, gods, immortals, remained frustratingly ambiguous. The magic book offered no concrete answers. Lucian closed the grimoire with a decisive snap. He'd already squeezed all the value he could out of Flamel College. His first clone had graduated ahead of schedule and rushed off to Hogwarts, and there was little left to learn under its familiar halls. Moreover, his current identity posed as a Chinese national, so a return home felt both natural and necessary. Seeking out those elusive Qi masters might prove far more rewarding, and after all, his own training in the Li family's Taoist arts was already complete. With a final glance at the dusty textbook, Lucian rose, determination cooling the last of his doubts. It was time to head back to China and see what real power awaited him there. Lucian stared out the train window, still puzzled by why the qi-refining masters in this world seemed so different from those he'd heard about. The next morning, with school on holiday, he boarded the Flamel Express bound for London. He hadn't even unpacked before his father broached the subject of sending him back to China. "Lucian," his father began, folding his newspaper and setting it aside, "I've been talking with your mother. This Flamel school of yours. It's far too dangerous. I never should have let you enroll. Things are too unstable overseas right now. We think it's best you return to China to continue your studies." Lucian opened his mouth to argue, but his father held up a hand. "You know, when I first agreed to let you study magic, it was only after the college's headmaster warned us. He said that if we didn't teach you to control the magic stirring in your veins, it could spiral out of control and threaten your life. But I've come to regret it. Magic won't make you immortal, and you can't show it to ordinary people without arousing fear, or worse. What good is power no one can ever see? It'd be far wiser to focus on your academics, ace the Cambridge or Harvard entrance exams, then come home to take over the family business." Lucian clenched his fists. He understood his father's concerns, but the thought of giving up magic altogether felt like abandoning a part of himself. He glanced at the tracks rushing past. The showdown was coming, heart and heritage against his father's well-meaning but firm plans for Lucian's future. Lucian had mastered magic by now, and he'd seen just how dangerous the British wizarding world could be. It made sense to abandon his studies and live quietly as a wealthy heir back in China. "All right," he said with a calm smile. His father, Jin Guoqing, stared at him in astonishment. He'd floated the idea of leaving school more than once before, and each time Lucian had outright refused. "You," Jin Guoqing began, but Lucian cut in gently. "Father, I was terrified this time. I almost died. I've thought it through. You're right. It's far safer to return to China and be ordinary." At that, Jin Guoqing burst into relieved laughter. "Good. Then pack your things. You leave tomorrow. Once I wrap up here in the next few months, I'll start shifting my business back to China and building it up there." Lucian inclined his head. "Even if I can't find her, it's fine." He was referring to the woman whose life he'd somehow inherited, his new mother. As his father stepped out to call her, Lucian closed his eyes for a moment and listened inwardly, using his telepathy to scan Jin Guoqing's thoughts. Everything checked out. His biological father had no suspicion about him, just genuine pride and relief. Satisfied, Lucian slipped E-Secret away and prepared for the journey home. Lucian carried Jin Baobao's memories, but he wasn't Jin Baobao himself. Strangers might overlook subtle inconsistencies, yet people who truly know you, like family, could notice alterations. Thankfully, his father, Jin Guoqing, hadn't raised any doubts. It made sense. Though Lucian was officially under his father's care, he spent most of his days at Flamel College in London, returning home only once or twice a year. And even then, Jin Guoqing was so consumed by company affairs that father and son rarely saw each other. Teenagers change. After all, any minor shift in temperament could be chalked up to normal adolescence, not a soul swap. His mother and younger sister were even less familiar with him. They'd last met 2 years ago, when his mother brought his sister to London for a brief visit. Both parents were devoted to their careers, outsourcing most of Lucian's upbringing to nannies. So stepping back into their lives now was worry-free. His absence would simply look like one more gap in a busy family schedule. For the past 2 years, now that his clones were maturing, some nearing 50, Lucian had begun to take a genuine interest in their families and children. If he ever doubted a clone's loyalty, he could simply adjust its memories. As a reward for finally granting them proper bodies, he went out of his way to arrange stable family lives for each newcomer, on the sole condition that they posed no threat to him. He'd laid down those rules when he created his first clone. The earlier prototypes hadn't required such safeguards. And since Lucian himself was the founding patriarch of the Li clan, managing those original clones had been far more straightforward. "Lucian, over here." As soon as he stepped off the plane, he spotted a striking woman waiting at the arrival's gate. With her chic cropped hair, red miniskirt, and confident poise, she looked every bit the successful executive, yet her warm smile told him she was still his little sister. Jin Yuanyuan, his clone twin, waved enthusiastically. 26 years old, a Tsinghua University graduate, and now co-running the family business with their mother, she embodied both high IQ and even higher EQ. In their world, true magic or chi cultivation demanded a rare birthright. Wizards needed wizard blood to channel magical power, and chi practitioners required a specialized lineage qualification to refine their inner energy. Without such credentials, no spell or cultivation method could take hold. Among Lucian's entire family, only he possessed that hidden gift. His father knew and kept the secret, but Jin Yuanyuan and their mother had no idea their son and sister was a practicing wizard. Ever since the divorce, communication between Lucian's parents had been minimal, leaving Lucian and his secret suspended in silence. Now, as Jin Yuanyuan guided him toward the waiting car, Lucian felt the familiar stir of anticipation. This trip to Bayan Temple would test every ounce of his hidden power and perhaps force him to reveal the truth at last. If he hadn't come home to China this time, he probably never would have picked up the phone. Lucian seldom saw his mother and sister, and he felt there was no need to burden them with anything that didn't concern ordinary people. Besides, the last thing he wanted was to frighten them once they learned he was a wizard. Whenever he called, he simply pretended to be just another college student abroad. "Sis?" Lucian stopped his rolling suitcase and gave his sister a big grin. Jin Yuanyuan looked him up and down, then patted his shoulder with a laugh. "I haven't seen you in 2 years, and now you've shot right past me in height." The last time they met, he had been a shy 15-year-old boy. Now, at 17, he was unrecognizable. Sure, he'd grown several inches, but it was the way he carried himself that struck her most, the easy confidence in his stance, the steady calm behind his eyes. After years working in their mother's company, Yuanyuan had grown accustomed to all sorts of faces, but nothing prepared her for the pride and wonder she felt as her little brother, all grown up, stepped off the train. "She's even more beautiful." Lucian smiled. Among ordinary humans, Jin Yuanyuan was nothing short of stunning. Wealthy families had long matched handsome men with beautiful women, so their children inevitably inherited striking features. Yuanyuan, raised with every advantage, not only possessed refined looks, but carried herself with poise, spoke eloquently, and displayed a depth of knowledge that made her stand out. Of course, that distinction only applied to mortals. Next to the elves of Middle-earth, next to Lucian, no human could compare. Yet perhaps elves, having witnessed centuries of beauty, had grown somewhat inured to a mere mortal's charms. "You certainly know how to flatter," Yuanyuan teased, her dark eyes dancing. "Do you use that silver tongue on all the girls at school?" He chuckled. "Only on the ones worth flattering." Her laughter was light and musical. "Well, Mother's away on business for a few days. In the meantime, consider me your personal guide to the city's best restaurants. I doubt you found anything half as good in your part of London." "That's okay," Lucian replied. "Father's hired a chef at home, specializing in Chinese cuisine." "Old Wang?" She raised an eyebrow. His cooking is only average by mainland China standards. Lucian shook his head, still smiling. No matter. With Yunyuan as his guide, these next few days promised to be anything but ordinary. Lucian and Jin Yuanyuan wandered the neon-lit streets, chatting as they went. Yuanyuan's voice was relentless. One topic spilled into the next like rapid fire, and Lucian answered good-naturedly, matching her pace. In no time, they'd put each other at ease. Finally, Yuanyuan glanced at him with a playful smile. "Hey, tonight I'll introduce you to some friends," she said. "My dad's shifting our family business back to China, so you'll probably be working with them sooner or later." They climbed into Yang Yuan's signature candy-pink sports car and roared onto the elevated highway. Lucian watched the city lights blur past, then shook his head. "No thanks," he replied gently. "I'm not cut out for corporate dealings, and I have no intention of running anyone's business. You know, I've always been more interested in ancient Taoist traditions. There's a place called Baiyun Temple not far from here. I was hoping to visit tomorrow." Yuanyuan raised an eyebrow but didn't press him. In fact, Lucian's disinterest in the family empire wasn't surprising. A trained wizard since childhood, his heart had always been set on joining the national Quidditch team, not balancing ledgers or attending board meetings. His curiosity about China's Taoist sects only made sense. He was the sort of person who sought out hidden temples just as eagerly as he chased winged balls across a pitch. And that, he thought with a secret smile, was precisely how he liked it. Lucian flipped through the magic manuals he'd collected, searching for any mention of Chinese cultivation. Almost nothing turned up, apart from the note that most qi refiners in China trace their roots back to Taoist temples. The most famous of these, at least in Beijing, is Baiyun Temple, the ancestral seat of the Quanzhen Longmen sect, revered as Quanzhen's premier monastery. "I think we should visit," Lucian suggested. "You'd get to meet local qi practitioners and see how their cultivation system really works." Jin Yuanyuan's eyes widened at the idea. "A Taoist temple? Lucian, don't turn into one of my classmates and become a monk. My father would go crazy. He's counting on you to inherit the family business." Lucian laughed. "I'm not about to don monk's robes. I have no interest in the corporate world. I told you 2 years ago I won't take over the family business." Jin Yuanyuan waved her hand as if swatting away a bothersome fly. "Fine, fine. Between my mother's company and my own ambitions, I'm perfectly happy." She paused, watching Lucian's steady gaze. True, every wealthy family had its intrigues, but she'd never dreamed of running her father's empire. She had her own path to carve, starting, perhaps, with a pilgrimage to Baiyun Temple. Jin Yuanyuan was fiercely proud of having earned her place at Tsinghua University on pure merit, a stark contrast to those second-generation heirs who coast through life on family fortunes, indulging in endless parties and lavish dinners. She intended to build her own success, not inherit someone else's. Lucian looked up, intrigued. "What happened to that classmate of yours who ran off to a Taoist temple to become a monk?" A faint smile curved Jin Yuanyuan's lips. "You mean Wang Ye? He's the third son of Wang Weiguo, the chairman of Zhonghai Group, and my childhood friend. Exceptionally bright, capable at everything he tries, yet curiously indifferent to the world around him. Like me, he won admission to Tsinghua on his own, though I'll admit it was easier for him. Then, in our junior year, the guy just dropped out and vanished to Wudang Mountain, swearing himself in as a Taoist priest." Lucian raised an eyebrow. "He really did that?" "Without a word of warning," she replied. "One day he was in class, the next he'd walked away from it all." Lucian frowned, glancing around the empty courtyard. "He still hasn't come back?" Jin Yuanyuan looked away, her cheeks flushing. Lucian cocked an eyebrow. "Be honest, sis. Do you like him?" She froze, embarrassment flaring across her face. "What are you talking about? Me, a future powerhouse, falling for some lazy, unambitious guy? Ridiculous." Quickly shifting gears, she waved her hand. "Anyway, about Baiyun Temple, I'll take you there tomorrow. I happen to know Taoist priest Lu. Mother's donated a fortune to his temple to attract high-profile patrons." Lucian leaned against the railing. "Have you heard any interesting rumors about Baiyun Temple? Anything supernatural?" Jin scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Supernatural? What century do you think this is? Even Priest Lu preaches science over superstition." Lucian smiled inwardly. After talking with Jin Yuanyuan, the pampered daughter of wealthy elites, he realized she had never even heard of chi refining masters. The authorities must be hiding that world remarkably well. I'd be happy to help, but I'll need the full chapter text to do a thorough rewrite. Could you please paste the entire chapter here? Chapter 437, The Righteous, the Villains, and the Imperial Court. Second update. Morning light filtered through the crimson gates of Bayan Temple as Lucian stepped inside. He paused, sizing up the Taoist priests milling about the courtyard. These aren't ordinary monks, he murmured. His senses prickled at the powerful chi radiating from them, energy on par with the seasoned wizards he'd encountered in London. Clearly, Bayan Temple was home to true chi-refining masters, not merely ritual priests. Just then a young Taoist, spotting him from across the yard, hurried forward. His eyes sparkled with recognition. "Master Lucian?" the youth asked, bowing slightly. Lucian inclined his head. "That's right. And you are?" With a respectful smile, the priest, Huang Ming, produced his phone and swiped to a profile picture of Lucian. "I'm Huang Ming. This morning, Miss Jin contacted my senior brother and asked him to receive you here. I've been sent to welcome you to Bayan Temple and answer any questions you might have." Lucian studied the earnest face before him, then nodded. "Thank you, Master Huang. I appreciate your help." Lucian discovered that Jin Yuanyuan had planned to accompany him on a visit to Bayan Temple today, but an urgent matter at the company forced her to cancel. Not wanting him to feel disappointed, she'd called a friend at the temple and arranged for a guide, none other than one of Bayan Temple's own Taoist priests. The man bowed slightly, flashing an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I can't go full monk on you," he said. "If my senior brother found out, he'd skin me alive. I'm not much older than you, so just call me Huang Ming, or Taoist Priest Huang if you like." Under Priest Huang's expert guidance, Lucian explored every courtyard, shrine, and hidden pagoda of Bayan Temple. He absorbed tales of its founding over 1,000 years ago, the legends of wandering hermits who meditated in its misty groves, and the intricate rituals performed in its grand main hall. Yet despite Huang Ming's encyclopedic knowledge of the temple's history and architecture, he never once mentioned the elusive chi-refining master rumored to reside there. "That's strange," Lucian thought as they paused before a row of ancient bell towers. If Priest Huang knows this place so well, surely he'd have heard about the chi refiner. When the tour concluded, Lucian bought 2 bottles of iced water from a small refreshment stall. He led Priest Huang to a quiet alcove shaded by ginkgo trees, where fewer tourists wandered. The sun glinted off yellowing leaves overhead, and the distant murmur of chanting monks drifted through the air. Lucian took a sip of water, set the other bottle on a low stone bench, and turned to his guide. It was time to ask the question that had been on his mind since he first learned of Bayan Temple's hidden master, and to see how Priest Huang would respond. Huang Ming offered a small, rueful smile. "It's been 15 years. I arrived at Bayan Temple when I was 7. Lucian leaned forward, eyes bright with anticipation. 15 years. Surely you must have learned some magic in all that time? Spells, elixirs, incantations? Huang Ming chuckled softly. Lucian, I think you've been reading too many fantasy novels. There's no magic here, no wind-bending spells or flying swords. The temple's library is full of Taoist scriptures, but they're just ordinary texts you could find online. No arcane secrets. He paused, then continued with a warm smile. But I have trained in martial arts to strengthen the body and cultivate health. If you're interested, I can teach you some basic techniques. Lucian's face lit up. Thanks to his mother's generous donations to the temple, he was welcomed and respected by the disciples. His senior brother had made it clear he should be treated kindly. Of course, the temple's core teachings, like refining the inner elixir or cultivating yang spirit, were reserved for sworn disciples. But simple methods of physical training, those Huang Ming was happy to share. Master Huang's own senior brother had become something of a TV star, popping up on variety shows to demonstrate health-preserving exercises like Ba Duan Jin and the famed Vajra Fist. Cultivation these days was nothing like the old days, when disciples shut themselves away in remote temples and focused solely on their training. Modern masters needed a public face. Even the heavenly master of Longhu Mountain, the undisputed pinnacle of the cultivation world, collaborated with the Cultural and Tourism Bureau appearing in documentaries and interviews to promote temple tourism and Taoist culture. Lucian took a steadying breath as he stood before Huang Ming in Baiyan Temple's courtyard. He knew this priest wasn't just a simple monk. His reputation alone told him that. Better to be open and honest. "Master Huang," he began, "I'll be frank. I'm no ordinary visitor. I've been abroad, studying cultivation traditions elsewhere, and I've only just returned to China. I'm here because I want to learn how today's cultivators live and work, what opportunities and challenges we face." For a moment, Huang Ming's placid expression flickered with surprise. Then he folded his hands, inclining his head ever so slightly. "An adept, you say? And what sort of adept might you be?" Lucian held out his hand, his fingertip curling in a beckoning gesture toward the bottled water in Huang Ming's grip. "Bottle, come to me." In an instant, the bottle lifted from Huang Ming's hand and floated into Lucian's. He offered it back with a calm smile. "Master Huang, I haven't lied or come here to provoke you. I simply don't understand all the customs of this country. I want to learn and to make friends." Huang Ming blinked in surprise, then snatched the bottle back. "You could have said that from the start," he scolded lightly. "No need for all these theatrics." Once he was certain Lucian was truly an alien, Huang Ming visibly relaxed. Facing someone like Lucian, someone with abilities far beyond ordinary human limits, was easier than dealing with everyday people. With mortals, every word had to be measured, every display of power carefully hidden. One wrong move, one slip of the tongue, and you risked alarming the sect elders, or worse, drawing the attention of government authorities. Better to welcome an extraterrestrial guest than to navigate mortal suspicion and bureaucracy. Actually, as long as it doesn't endanger ordinary people, any conflict among aliens, even a fight to the death, is their own business. "I wasn't sure before, but after doing some reconnaissance, I've pieced things together," Lucian said with a reassuring smile. Huang Ming nodded thoughtfully. "It's wise to be cautious around the unknown. Since your family has donated generously to our temple, you're welcome to ask me anything. So long as it doesn't involve our sect's deepest mysteries, I'll be forthright." "Thank you, Taoist Huang," Lucian replied, bowing respectfully and offering the traditional fist and palm salute. He then began to outline the current situation of Qi practitioners across the nation. The conversation proceeded far more smoothly than he'd anticipated. Influenced by modern culture and the boundless flow of information online, young priests like Huang Ming harbored few of the old taboos and were refreshingly open. By the time they finished talking, Lucian had gained a much clearer understanding of domestic Qi cultivation. Lucian had learned that the world of Qi cultivation was roughly split into three great powers: the righteous halls, the villainous sect, and the imperial court. The righteous factions alone numbered in the dozens, from time-honored institutions like Tianqi Mansion and White Cloud Temple to the legendary martial monasteries of Shaolin, the Tang sect, Wudang, and Wuhou. Alongside these stood powerful clan-based lineages, such as the Lu, Wang, and Gao families, each with its own unique style and set of secret techniques. Even newer, corporate-style organizations had begun to emerge, the most notorious of which was the Tianqiahui. Each of these groups cultivated qi in wildly different ways, producing a dazzling array of abilities and specialties. Lucian felt a surge of excitement at the thought of all the new skills he could someday master. In contrast, there was only one true outlaw sect, Quanxing. Founded over 1,000 years ago by the philosopher Yang Zhu, one of the famed 100 schools of the Warring States era, Quanxing preached strict self-preservation and a rejection of material encumbrance. Its adherents regarded bodily desire and attachment as shackles on the soul, forging their strength through austere training and ruthless ambition. Though branded villains by the mainstream, their single-minded pursuit of power had kept them alive through centuries of persecution and made them more dangerous than any other organization in the land. Most members of the Quanxing sect are either independent cultivators or disciples cast out from other schools. In fact, anyone who declares themselves Quanxing is accepted into its ranks, which has led to an unruly mix of personalities and motivations. The established sects despise them so thoroughly that they've even enacted a standing decree. If you encounter a member of Quanxing, you may slay them on sight without fear of censure. Chapter 438. Let's Talk. Lucian paused in the corridor, weighing his thoughts. Not every member of a so-called demon sect is inherently evil. He'd seen enough tales of martial heroes to know that even villains sometimes harbor compassion and honor. In those stories, the lines between right and wrong blur, as often within each school or clan there are noble souls striving to do good. By the same token, the righteous factions are hardly beyond reproach. Power breeds intrigue, and the internal rivalries among the respectable sects can be every bit as ruthless as any external threat. The very reason the Quan Xing organization still stands after 1,000 years is because its opponents, the so-called decent forces, hesitate to dismantle it completely. They fear that in crushing Quan Xing, they would ignite a civil war among themselves, each faction jockeying for the spoils of victory. Above all these sects looms the imperial court, undisputed ruler of the realm's politics and security. One of its most enigmatic creations is a bureau known publicly as Anywhere Communications. Ostensibly the nation's largest express delivery enterprise, it operates under the direct authority of the throne. Its real mission, however, is to monitor and control extraterrestrial and magical threats that might endanger ordinary citizens. Every agent in its ranks is, in fact, an alien, disguised as couriers, warehouse staff, or drivers, tasked with neutralizing rogue wizards and other supernatural menaces before they can strike. Abroad, by contrast, particularly in European lands, governments rarely interfere with wizardry. Magic users walk the streets freely, bound only by loose guild regulations. Here, however, the Emperor would brook no such laissez-faire approach. Peace, as always, demands vigilance, and sometimes sacrifice, from those sworn to protect it. Restraining wizards falls to the Ministry of Magic. But on the American continent, a private consortium of wealthy elites wields far greater influence. Even the government bows to their power over most supernatural beings. Within their own borders, of course, the government still claims ultimate authority. Broadly speaking, no sect dares to defy Nadutong. Not even Quan Xing, who once laughed as he butchered rival clans, would risk targeting ordinary mortals. Nadutong's true purpose is to preserve the equilibrium of the supernatural world and to shield everyday people from discovering that it exists. Whenever any individual or faction jeopardizes that balance, whether their motives are noble or malevolent, Nadutong moves to eradicate the threat without hesitation. Yet it never intrudes directly into the internal affairs of other magical communities. Instead, the most serious disputes are settled by the so-called Council of Ten, the 10 most authoritative and powerful supernatural figures aligned with the forces of order. Lucian listened carefully as Huang Ming outlined these structures. Though Huang Ming had already shared much of this information, gaps remained, details that could prove crucial if the hidden world were to unravel. Huang Ming had only given Lucian a brief outline of the situation before pointing him to an online forum where expatriates in the city shared their findings. By skimming through the posts and piecing together scattered clues, Lucian had already formed a clear picture of what was going on. "That's basically it," he said, folding his notes. Huang Ming leaned forward, curiosity in his eyes. "By the way, Mr. Jin, are you a natural-born talent, or did you acquire your abilities through training?" Lucian paused, choosing his words. "I'd say I'm the latter." He went on to explain. Abilities generally fall into two categories, congenital and acquired. Congenital talents manifest naturally, you're born with them, and they just awaken. Acquired talents require study and practice. You learn the spells or techniques, hone the skill, and only then can you wield the power. Think of legilimency, for instance. Some wizards are born able to peer into minds, while others must memorize the incantations and train for years before they can cast the spell. He smiled wryly. But don't think nature automatically beats nurture. Ultimately, strength comes down to the individual. Whether you're born with a gift or you earn it through hard work, a truly powerful person will find a way to be strong, one way or the other. Lucian watched Huang Ming with mild amusement as he examined the glass vial in his hand. "Judging by my current avatar, it's clearly an acquired alien form," Lucian explained. "To cast spells here, you must attend a magic school and learn the incantations. Yet I'm not limited to just those learned techniques. I also have innate abilities, manipulating metal with magnetism, generating electricity, even telepathy, and the rest of my repertoire comes from spells I've gathered in other worlds. Huang Ming's eyes flicked to the vial, and he remembered how effortlessly Lucian had made it fly back into his hand moments ago. He hesitated, then blurted out, "This is the first time I've met someone from another land who uses magic. If you'd ever be interested, perhaps we could." He stopped, cheeks coloring slightly. "Only if you want to. I don't mean to impose." Lucian smiled, recognizing the earnest curiosity in Huang Ming's tone. "How could I refuse?" he replied. "I'd welcome the opportunity. I'm just as eager to learn the magical methods practiced here." Huang Ming's face brightened, and Lucian knew they had taken the first step towards sharing their world's secrets. Lucian's curiosity about the martial techniques practiced by China's great domestic sects had only grown, and Baiyongguan was among the most celebrated Taoist orders. Huang Ming glanced at him and said quietly, "Come with me. But win or lose, you mustn't tell my senior brother about this." Lucian agreed, and Huang Ming led him through winding temple paths to a small, tourist-closed grove behind Baiyun Temple. "This is where I usually train," the priest explained. "At this hour, hardly anyone comes here." They stepped into a moonlit clearing. Huang Ming assumed a steady stance and performed the Taoist fist-holding ritual, his voice calm but firm. "At Baiyun Temple, we reject flashy esoteric tricks. We devote ourselves entirely to cultivating and safeguarding our own life force. So be prepared, Lucian. Mind your center." "Thank you for the reminder, Taoist priest," Lucian replied, echoing the fist's salute. Over the time they'd spent together, Lucian had come to see that Huang Ming, despite his priestly title, was straightforward and sincere, not at all the schemer one might expect. Lucian had volunteered to spar not out of bravado, but from a genuine curiosity about these foreign magicians' talents. Before they began, he made a point of warning Master Huang Ming to hold back. He didn't want to risk a serious injury in what was supposed to be a friendly test of skill. After all, most Western wizards would have no clue about the Taoist art of dual cultivation of body and soul. Lucian, however, was different. Thanks to his deep study of the Li family's Taoist traditions and the memories of Li Xuan, he was hailed as a master in his own realm. He fully understood that Huang Ming's method, focusing all one's energy inward to strengthen flesh and spirit rather than relying on spells, yielded tremendous physical power and made hand-to-hand combat extraordinarily deadly. The moment the duel began, a crackling aura of qi enveloped Huang Ming's form, and he lunged at Lucian with breathtaking speed. Lucian's eyes flicked with interest. "Not bad," he murmured. In a fluid motion, he swept out his wand and began the incantation of a full-body binding spell. "Statum vinculum, by earth and stone, be petrified." Sizzling runes danced through the air, colliding with Huang Ming's qi. For an instant, the Taoist master's advance wavered as the binding magic gripped him, slowing his strike to a halt. Lucian held his ground, wand raised, but tension eased in his shoulders. He had no intention of crushing Huang Ming outright. The purpose of this match was to probe the strengths and weaknesses of Baiyongguan's cultivation techniques, just enough to learn, not enough to defeat. Watching how Huang Ming braced against the spell, Lucian began plotting his next move. Lucian stood at the edge of the secluded training grounds, closing his eyes for a moment as he calibrated his power. "We'll begin at the level of an ordinary adult wizard, and then ramp it up," he murmured to himself. "That way I can gauge what these foreign mages are really capable of. It's a bit off the beaten path, but necessary." He raised his staff and launched a narrow beam of crackling azure energy at his sparring partner, the veteran warrior mage Huang Ming. Huang Ming didn't bother with a magical barrier. He simply ducked beneath the blast and charged in, delivering a heavy punch to Lucian's ribs. "Pretty flashy," he taunted, "but can you keep up with me in close quarters?" Unfazed, Lucian let a slow smile spread across his face. "Speaking of close quarters," he gestured sharply, and spectral vines erupted from the ground, lashing around Huang Ming's ankles and yanking him off balance. "Obstruction curse!" Huang Ming stumbled, his momentum clawed away in an instant. Seizing the opening, Lucian called out another incantation. A hardened lattice of magical energy shot from his fingertips and snapped around Huang Ming's body, turning limbs to stone. Full-body binding! For a heartbeat, It looked as if the warrior mage were trapped. Then Huang Ming roared, muscles straining as cracks spidered across the binding shell. With a thunderous crack, the prison shattered, and he ripped himself free in a single, powerful motion. Dust and fragments of petrified magic fell away as he flexed his arms, breathing hard but grinning defiantly. "Your magic resistance is strong," he said, "but what do you know about physical endurance?" Lucian's eyes lit up. Exactly the reaction he'd been hoping for. It was one thing to test pure spellcraft, but today he would see how far raw power could carry a warrior against a wizard. Lucian can wrench himself free from the binding spell, not just through sheer force of will, but by channeling the magical energy coursing through his body to counteract its effects. Chapter 439, Chuyang Shen vs. Guardian Second Update. Brother Huang, here I come. The moment Huang Ming shook off Lucian's binding spell, he surged forward with a palm strike aimed squarely at Lucian's abdomen. Lucian staggered back, forcing a sharp breath, but he didn't hesitate. With a swift flourish of his wand, he intoned, "Arrows of the astral bow, manifest!" 6 glowing projectiles ripped through the air, each one a perfect shaft of condensed mana streaking toward its target. Huang Ming's eyes narrowed. In mid-stride, he shifted his stance, opening his hands. One by one, the enchanted arrows slammed into his palms, metallic shafts shearing apart on contact, until there was nothing left but splinters of light that faded at his feet. Lucian watched carefully. Bayan Temple's body and soul fortification technique clearly granted its disciples impressive resistance to magic, but it hadn't erected an impenetrable wall. Sharp implements still pierced mortal flesh if the blow was strong enough, and temple cultivators, though mighty, were not invulnerable. "Collapse!" Lucian called, weaving his wand in a tight figure-8. A wave of numbing energy surged from the tip of his staff, seeking to invade Huang Ming's consciousness. The coma spell was subtle. It probed the mind's defenses, threatening to drag the victim into a dreamlike stupor. Huang Ming's expression flickered. The arrows he'd just rent apart dissolved to ash in his grasp as a dull weariness washed over him. His arms trembled, his breathing grew shallow. Seeing his chance, Lucian advanced. His wand rammed forward in a vicious jab, not to kill, but to incapacitate. "Your defenses are strong," he said quietly, "but not unbreakable." Huang Ming stumbled, one hand clutching his forehead. He shook his head as if to clear it, but Lucian pressed his advantage, stepping in for another spell. A flicker of azure fire danced along the length of his wand. "You rely on physical toughness," Lucian observed, "yet neglect the mind's fortress. I'll see whether your spirit can stand this trial." With a sharp incantation, he unleashed a second wave of spiritual force. It slammed into Huang Ming's chest, knocking him backward. The Guardian Shen, the temple's famed bodyguard, crashed through a circle of shattered stones and collapsed to one knee, his spirit flickering like a candle in the wind. Lucian lifted his wand, eyes steely. "Yield," he offered, voice calm, "or prepare for the next trial." Huang Ming glared up at him, a mixture of pain and indignation twisting his features. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, with a harsh rasp, Huang Ming spat, "This isn't over." Lucian lowered his wand fractionally, ready for whatever came next. The duel was far from finished, but the first clear advantage had unmistakably fallen to Chuyang Shen, Lucian himself. Lucian paused a moment to assess. He wanted to know whether Huang Ming's technique could truly fortify the soul against enchantments. As it stood, every spell Lucian had cast was throttled back to the baseline of an ordinary adult wizard. Granted, most adult wizards seldom fought and lacked Lucian's practiced agility. "Drink," Lucian called out, unleashing a wave of arcane energy. The slumber hex struck Huang Ming full on. His eyes fluttered, his legs gave way, and for a heartbeat he teetered on the edge of unconsciousness. Then, with a sharp cry, he slammed his right fist onto his left palm, shattering the curse. Huang Ming shook his head clear. Internally, he admitted, "Mr. Jin's power is impressive. If Xiao Dao is to stand a chance, I'll have to unleash my full strength." With that, he lunged. His right foot drove him forward like a cannon shot, doubling his speed and dispelling the stalling curse's sluggish pull. Clearly, he'd been holding back, afraid of hurting Lucian, but now there was no restraint. "Heavy armor," Lucian intoned. Huang Ming's fist rocketed toward Lucian's midsection, too fast for most adult wizards to track. In that instant, Lucian activated the Iron Armor Curse. A gleaming lattice of metallic sea runes cascaded over his body, forming living plate that braced every muscle and bone. The two forces collided with a deafening crack. Sparks of magic and metal sent ripples through the air, testing both soul and sinew in an all-out contest of wills. It would take an auror's skill to stand a chance. As Lucian raised a shield of magical energy to block Huang Ming's blow, he ran through the possibilities in his mind. A typical adult wizard carries only a handful of combat spells, and none of them comes close to the power of the unforgivable curses. And even if someone dared cast one, hitting Huang Ming would be nearly impossible. Once Huang Ming closed the gap, an ordinary wizard's melee ability would count for nothing against his raw strength. In Lucian's experience, only a wizard trained to Auror standards could learn the ironclad armor hex, the only known counter to such a devastating assault. Outside the Ministry's elite, few civilian wizards could even master it. "Shatter it for me!" Huang Ming snarled and stopped holding back. Crackles of chi danced around his fists as he struck the barrier with all his might. The ward buckled under the impact, sending a pulse of force that Lucian could feel through his bones. Had that blow landed on the concrete floor instead of his shield, it would have left a crater. Lucian braced himself as Huang Ming's fist pummeled the air before him. Normally, a raw physical strike of that magnitude couldn't breach an iron armor curse, but when Huang Ming channeled his chi into each blow, the protective enchantment began to splinter. Lucian felt the spell's magical plating crack, and then shatter with a sharp, echoing snap. "Repel! Full force!" Lucian cried, thrusting his wand toward Huang Ming. A wave of concussive energy burst forth, sending Huang Ming hurtling backwards several meters. Before his opponent could recover, Lucian seized the moment and cast Apparition, vanishing into thin air. Teleportation isn't just for infiltration anymore. Among elite aurors, it's as integral to combat tactics as any offensive spell. When the shimmering afterimage finally dissolved, Huang Ming stood alone, blinking in disbelief. His expression mingled respect with surprise. Teleportation was once an arcane Taoist art, an almost lost technique of instantaneous movement, preserved only by a few masters through talismanic rites. Yet here was an auror wielding it with such precision and speed that Huang Ming knew he was facing someone who had mastered both magic and martial tradition to terrifying effect. Among innate disciples, a rare few have awakened the power of swift movement, like Feng Xian of Tianxiahui, whose reputation for strength precedes him. Huang Ming's heart sank. If Feng gave chase, they wouldn't outrun him. They'd be on the defensive from the start. Huang Ming scratched his head, worry creasing his brow. After a moment's hesitation, he called out to Lucian. "Master Lucian, I'm about to deploy a special technique, our Bayan Temple's most potent soul art. I've only just mastered it. If you can't counter it, you might as well concede now." No sooner had he spoken than Huang Ming's body froze, his eyes glazed over, and his soul burst free, racing toward Lucian at a speed several times greater than any physical form could achieve. "Izuyo, lend me your power." Lucian watched steadily as the translucent silvery form closed the distance. He felt a thrill of approval, an opponent who could separate soul and spirit in combat. Few could do that. He, for one, had not yet mastered such an art, though he was well versed in spells to assault, extract, and seal souls. A faint, knowing smile curved Lucian's lips. This road, he realized, was going to be far more interesting than he'd imagined. Lucian still hadn't figured out how to project his soul from his body and fight with it directly. Even so, given his current level of power, a soul-based duel would never outmatch the destructive force of casting magic in his physical form. But it's at least an option. More importantly, it proves that the Bayan Guan technique truly can strengthen the soul. After all, without a certain baseline of soul strength, no amount of training would let you withdraw your spirit and do battle outside your body. What advantages does a fortified soul bring? In Lucian's case, an enhanced soul translates into greater mental power, and that, in turn, fuels his psychic abilities. At present, his telepathy, combined with soul reading, only lets him peer into minds, search memories, and copy them. He's a long way from matching Professor X at his peak, who could freeze a crowd in place and manipulate enemy bodies with nothing but psychic force. But as soon as Lucian's soul grows stronger, he knows his mental and psychic powers will finally start to catch up. Lucian closed his eyes and pictured the serene halls of Bayan Temple. If he could master their ancient soul-strengthening techniques, perhaps he could continuously fortify his own spirit, and one day command an entire planet's inhabitants without a single brainwave amplifier. Steeling himself, he raised his wand and spoke with absolute clarity, expecto patronum. He had studied many methods for confronting a formless attacker, among them the soul-sealing rite he'd learned as a magic apprentice, but none suited this moment. In the eyes of the wizarding world, there were really only two ways to counter a pure soul assault. The first was the killing curse. A direct hit would shatter Huang Ming's disembodied essence instantly, but Huang Ming's soul could dart through the air at speeds far exceeding his physical body, making him all but impossible to hit. Besides, lethal curses were strictly forbidden in this competition. That left only the Patronus charm. A Patronus is the living embodiment of a wizard's spiritual energy, the strongest possible shield against soul attacks, and also a spell only those with truly unwavering hearts could ever hope to master. Lucian drew in a slow, steady breath, summoned every ounce of resolve, and unleashed his Patronus. Given Lucian's abilities in the wizarding world, he'll truly need the elite wizards to step in if he hopes to stand any chance of fighting back. Chapter 440, Entering the Luoqian Grand Ceremony, Update 1. Lucian watched Huang Ming prepare his soul strike and thought, there must be many powerful techniques in this world. With that, he summoned his guardian spirit, a hefty, bamboo-munching panda, to shield him. This was Lucian's first trial at the Taoist temple, and he'd already encountered something astonishing. He couldn't wait to see what other sorcery lay in store. Huang Ming's ethereal fists surged forward, but each blow collided with the panda's rotund form and failed to pierce its defenses. The creature simply stood its ground, unflinching and serene, as Huang Ming punched, kicked, and jabbed in growing frustration. He finally stopped and blinked at the incongruous sight. "What's this? A giant panda? Weren't you a true Beijinger?" he muttered. The panda, clearly a Sichuan native, lifted its head, puzzled by the question. Huang Ming shook his head in disbelief. "Beijingers really do love Sichuan pandas," he conceded with a wry smile. Lucian grinned. "Master Huang, I think we're at an impasse. You can't break through my guardian's defense, and as long as the panda stands, I can't strike your Yang Shen. We'll call it a draw." "With pleasure," Huang Ming agreed. His spirit retracted from the air, weaving back into his body. When his eyes opened again, they glinted with newfound respect as he approached Lucian. "I never imagined there was a foreign spell capable of countering my Yang Shen. It's truly formidable." Lucian folded his arms and offered a teasing smile. "Stinky boy, now you understand what it means when they say there's always someone out there above the heavens. Don't go thinking you're the best in the sect, so you can slack off on your daily practice." A moment later, a middle-aged Taoist priest with a thick beard materialized behind Huang Ming. Startled, Ming leaped to his feet, then forced out an uneasy laugh. "Senior brother, I've been practicing diligently. Why have you come?" The priest's lips curled in a sneer. "I heard you'd summoned a Yang Shen, so I came to inspect it." Before Ming could respond, the priest's hand swung down, striking him on the head. Huang Ming crumpled to the ground. Master Lu loomed over him. "You've only just mastered your Yang Shen, yet you're already flaunting it. If your spirit hadn't restrained itself to defense, you'd be a corpse right now." "Master Liu." Lucian retracted his spirit guardian and in an instant teleported beside the priest, folding his hands in salute. At the precise moment Huang Ming's Yang Shen flickered into view, Master Liu had already closed the gap, moving with a speed that far outmatched the young disciple's spirit form. From what Huang Ming had told him, Lucian recognized this imposing figure as Liu Xingyang, the senior brother appointed by the sect master to oversee Ming's training. "Master, you honor me too much," Lucian said respectfully. Patronuses are almost purely defensive, meant to ward off dementors or serve as long-distance messengers, but they carry virtually no offensive power. Lucian, however, was no ordinary wizard. His innate strength far exceeded that of his peers, and he'd even refined the Patronus charm itself. At the mere thought of it, his Patronus could solidify into a palpable force, strong enough to shatter stone, let alone pierce a spirit like Taoist Huang's Yang Shen. Lucian Yang turned toward Lucian, surprise flashing in his eyes. Master Jin, there's no need for such formality, he said. I never imagined Miss Jin's brother would be one of us. Lucian offered a faint smile. Aside from my father, no one in my family knows the truth about me. I'd appreciate it if you and Master Jin would keep this strictly between us. Lucian Yang inclined his head solemnly. Of course, the alien realm is fraught with dangers far beyond our own world. Best that your family remains unaware. Ignorance can be a blessing. Huang Ming scrambled to his feet, clutching the back of his head. Brother, we were just sparring, nothing more. You still need to get back to Lek Shuo, ring the younger disciples. Don't dawdle here. Lucian Yang's eyes narrowed. He turned to Huang Ming and warned in a low voice, keep it professional with Mr. Jin, no more fooling around, or I'll have you copying the Tao Te Ching 50 times tonight. Then, bowing slightly to the newcomer, he shifted his tone to one of courtesy. Mr. Jin, he said, your talent is remarkable. Have you given any thought to taking part in the Grand Luo Tian ceremony next week? Lucian blinked in surprise. The Grand Luo Tian ceremony? In this era, even otherworldly visitors had to earn money legally, and the Taoist temples were no exception. But many priests excelled at ritual and cultivation, not commerce. That's why Master Lucian Yang had instructed his junior disciple, Huang Ming, to entertain Lucian, officially a wealthy second-generation heir. The hope was that Lucian, impressed by their hospitality and spiritual prowess, might bless the temple with generous support. Discovering Lucian's extraordinary abilities had been an unexpected bonus. Now, with the Grand Luo Tian ceremony looming, Master Liu saw an even greater opportunity, a chance to showcase both Lucian's gift and their own temple's renown. As Huang Ming stepped aside to show Lucian to a seat of honor, Lucian Yang regarded him with genuine warmth. So, he repeated, what do you say? Will you join us in the Grand Luo Tian ceremony? Lucian had been scrolling through the forum earlier and noticed a flurry of posts about the upcoming Luotian Grand Ceremony, though he hadn't had time to investigate further. Now, as Huang Ming explained, this year's Grand Ceremony is unlike any before it. Mr. Lu Jin of the Lu family is offering the Tongqian Talisman as the champion's prize. At the mere mention of the Tongqian Talisman, Huang Ming's eyes lit up. What exactly is the Tongqian Talisman? Lucian asked. Huang Ming practically bounced with excitement. According to Master, it's the ultimate achievement in talismanic arts. Normally, crafting a talisman requires setting up an altar, circulating qi, and all sorts of meticulous preparations. A Shangqing master who specializes in talismans might spend hours on a single piece. But the Tongqian Talisman? You can draw it instantly, right on the spot. No altar, no qi cultivation beforehand, just a few strokes, and it's done. You could theoretically produce dozens in the time it would take to make one ordinary talisman. That sounds incredible, Lucian said, his interest piqued. I definitely want to try for it. In our last conversation, Huang Ming had outright dismissed talisman arts built on booths and rote practice, insisting that the Bayan Temple's method, focusing every ounce of energy on cultivating one's innate nature and destiny, was the only true path. Yet the moment someone mentioned the Tongqian Talisman, his eyes lit up. That alone proved it was no ordinary technique. We'll compete together and represent Bayan Temple, Lucian said. But Master's already warned me. With my current level, there's no way I can claim first place or win the Tongqian Talisman. I'm really just going to observe how the younger generation from the major sects stacks up. Huang Ming patted him on the shoulder. Don't pin too many hopes on victory. Take it as I do, a chance to broaden your horizons. Lucian knew Huang Ming's abilities were on par with his own, so neither had realistic odds of finishing first. He'd invited Jin Baobao along, partly because he was good company. Traveling solo can get pretty dull, and partly because he wasn't foolish enough to miss the unspoken advice in his senior brother's words. Lucian had only just returned to China when he learned about an upcoming gathering of foreign sorcerers, the Luotian Grand Ceremony. Eager to see their magic firsthand and perhaps claim a Tongqian talisman of his own, he knew this would be the perfect chance. Otherwise, he'd have to trek from one Bayan temple to the next, testing each sect's methods one by one, a process that could stretch on for months. How do I sign up? He asked. Yes, bright with anticipation. Taoist Huang Ming smiled. No need to register just yet. Anyone under 30 can join. When the ceremony draws near, come with us to the registration tent and you'll be able to enroll on the spot. Thank you, Taoist Huang, Lucian replied, offering a respectful bow. Please don't be so formal, Huang Ming waved him off. We get along well. You're quite the unconventional fellow. Feel free to call me Old Huang, and I'll call you Old Lu. Lucian laughed softly. All right, Old Huang it is.